Hard work guarantees success. You've been told since childhood that hard work guarantees success, that if you just put in enough effort, the rewards will follow. It's a simple story, repeated in classrooms, whispered in homes, and shouted in motivational talks. Work hard, stay focused, don't give up. That's the formula. But what if that story isn't the whole truth? What if, beneath this comforting belief, there's a more complex and darker reality, one where systems are rigged, where the promise of success keeps you grinding endlessly, while others profit from your exhaustion and blind loyalty? This isn't just theory or cynicism, it's history. It's lived experience, it's the hidden engine behind economic inequality, social stagnation, and personal burnout. Imagine two workers, both start with the same dream, a better life. Both wake before dawn, work late into the night, sacrifice weekends, and refuse to quit. But one finds opportunity after opportunity, climbing ladders, gaining promotions, building wealth. The other stays stuck, passed over, underpaid, unseen. Why? It's not always about effort. It's about the system's design. Consider the early 20th century factory workers during the Industrial Revolution. They labored under brutal conditions, 12, 14, even 16-hour days, 6 or 7 days a week. The promise was that this hard work would build a better future for their children. Yet, wages remained low, injuries common, and the profits went to factory owners and investors far removed from the grimy floors. The system rewarded toil, yes, but only so far as it extracted maximum labor for minimum cost. Hard work did not guarantee success. It guaranteed survival and sustained the wealth of others. Fast forward to today, and the pattern remains. In the gig economy, millions work multiple jobs, clock endless hours, and hustle on side projects. All told, this relentless work ethic will pay off. Yet, studies show most gig workers earn below minimum wage once expenses are counted. They face no benefits, no job security, and their exhaustion fuels corporate profits. The narrative of hard work as a ticket out becomes a treadmill, spinning faster while the finish line moves further away. Education is another battleground. Students buckle under years of rigorous study, standardized tests, and unpaid internships, believing that their sacrifices will lead to rewarding careers. Yet, many graduate burdened with debt, entering precarious employment or underemployment. Meanwhile, education institutions and loan companies collect billions. Effort is exchanged not for opportunity, but for financial chains. Why does this myth endure? Because it's convenient. It shifts responsibility away from structural problems and onto individuals. If you fail, the story says, it's because you didn't work hard enough. If you succeed, it's because you earned it. This simplifies a complex world, comforting those in power and blaming those left behind. It masks systemic barriers, discrimination, nepotism, economic inequality, and policy failures that restrict who can truly rise. The belief in meritocracy feeds consumer culture too. It keeps you buying the latest productivity tools, self-help books, expensive courses, and motivational seminars. Each promises to unlock your hidden potential, to break the cycle, if only you try harder. Meanwhile, corporations profit from your perpetual striving. Your exhaustion is commodified as motivation, your failure framed as lack of effort. This dynamic creates a trap, one where exhaustion becomes a badge of honor, where burnout is normalized, where rest is guilt, and where the relentless grind consumes health, relationships, and joy. But acknowledging this reality isn't surrender, it's liberation. It's the first step toward questioning whose success is being guaranteed, whose efforts are rewarded, and whose are exploited. It's an invitation to look beyond individual willpower and examine the social, economic, and political structures shaping opportunity. Activists, scholars, and communities around the world are challenging this myth. They demand living wages, labor protections, equitable education, and social safety nets. They advocate for redefining success, not as endless productivity, but as well-being, fairness, and dignity. They show that hard work matters, but only when systems support it justly. Imagine a world where your effort leads to real opportunity, not exploitation, where rest is valued as much as hustle, where success is shared, not hoarded. This vision requires dismantling myths and building new narratives. It means calling out rigged systems and refusing to blame individuals for their circumstances. It means creating economies that serve people, not the other way around. So, next time you hear hard work guarantees success, listen closely. Remember the hidden stories, the workers lost in factories, the gig laborers chasing fading paychecks, the students drowning in debt. Remember that effort alone is not a magic key. It's the door that opens only if the system lets it. And if you find yourself grinding in that system, exhausted and uncertain, know you're not failing. You're trapped in a story that isn't true for everyone, but you can rewrite it. Because real success isn't just about working hard. It's about working smart, together, and demanding a world where your effort finally pays off. Not just for the few, but for all. That is the promise worth fighting for. Emotions are always weakness. You were taught from an early age to hide your feelings. Whether explicitly told or silently observed, the message echoed in every interaction. Showing emotion is a sign of weakness. Crying was discouraged, anger was shamed, joy was muted, and vulnerability was a secret to be buried deep. This belief that emotions must be controlled, contained, or even denied has been passed down like a sacred rule in many cultures and families. But what if this teaching did not protect you? What if it actually robbed you of something vital? Your empathy, your intimacy, your very humanity. At first glance, the idea that emotions are weakness seems logical. In a world that rewards toughness, resilience, and control, showing vulnerability can be seen as a liability. In dangerous or competitive environments, guarding your feelings can feel like armor, but this armor is a double-edged sword, cutting off not just harm, but also connection. When you numb your emotions, you numb your ability to feel for others. Empathy, the invisible thread that binds us, becomes frayed or even snaps entirely. Consider the person who was never allowed to cry as a child. They learn that sadness must be hidden at all costs, that tears make you less worthy. Over time, this suppression becomes automatic, unconscious. They may appear strong on the surface, but inside, their emotional landscape becomes a barren desert. They struggle to comfort others or to be comforted because the language of feelings is foreign to them. Their relationships suffer. They exist alongside others, but remain isolated in emotional silence. Emotions are not just private experiences. They are the currency of connection. Anger, when expressed healthily, is a powerful signal. It can assert boundaries and demand respect. Joy shared can ignite happiness in others. Fear communicated can build safety and trust. But when these feelings are labeled as weakness and suppressed, communication breaks down. Intimacy becomes impossible because intimacy demands vulnerability. To be truly close to another person, you must reveal your inner world, the fears, hopes, pain, and delight that make you human. A society that values emotional repression creates a feedback loop of disconnection. Children learn from adults who hide feelings. Adults model restraint and denial. Empathy atrophies. People become isolated islands, guarded not by walls of stone, but by walls of silence. This phenomenon is visible in many modern contexts, from the rise in loneliness to the prevalence of mental health disorders masked by stoicism. The belief that emotions are weakness traps people in a paradox. The harder they try to appear strong, the more fragile and disconnected they become. The consequences extend beyond the personal and interpersonal. They shape entire cultures. In many workplaces, emotional expression is still stigmatized. Employees are expected to perform, deliver results, and suppress feelings that might slow productivity. In some communities, men are especially burdened by the expectation to man up, never showing tears or vulnerability. This suppression can lead to aggression, emotional outbursts, or destructive coping mechanisms. The price of hiding emotions is paid in the currency of mental health crises, addiction, and fractured relationships. History is filled with examples where the repression of emotion has had devastating effects. Consider soldiers trained to suppress fear and grief to function in war. While necessary for survival in the short term, many return home emotionally numb, unable to process trauma, their lives unraveling as a result. Or think about families where love is expressed only through duty and silence, where children grow up feeling unloved, learning to bottle their emotions until they explode in anger or despair. But the belief that emotions are weakness is not an unchangeable truth. It is a cultural script, one that can be rewritten. True strength is not in the absence of feeling, but in the courage to face emotions honestly. It takes immense bravery to be vulnerable, to admit fear or pain. Emotional openness builds resilience because it fosters understanding and support. When you allow yourself to feel fully, you reclaim your humanity. The journey from emotional repression to emotional freedom is not easy. It often requires unlearning lifelong lessons and confronting deeply ingrained fears, but the rewards are profound. Empathy grows, relationships deepen, and a sense of belonging emerges. You move from isolation to connection, from numbness to vitality. Imagine a world where emotions are seen not as weaknesses but as sources of power. A world where crying is met with comfort, not shame. Where anger is a catalyst for change rather than a cause for punishment. Where joy and sorrow are shared openly, weaving the fabric of community. This is not fantasy. It is a possibility waiting to be embraced. You are not broken because you feel deeply. You are not weak because your heart aches or your tears fall. In fact, feeling deeply is the source of your greatest strength. It is the light that guides you through darkness, the thread that connects you to others, and the truth that grounds your existence. So, next time you feel the urge to hide your emotions, pause. Remember that vulnerability is the birthplace of empathy and intimacy. It is the bridge from isolation to connection. Embrace your feelings as part of your power, because in a world that teaches you to fear emotion, choosing to feel is an act of radical courage. You were never meant to be a self-policing machine. You were meant to be human, flawed, emotional, and beautifully connected. Love must be earned. You weren't born lovable. From the earliest moments, the message whispered around you, sometimes shouted, sometimes subtle, was that love is not a birthright, but a prize to be won. You had to prove yourself worthy, again and again. This is a profound wound, not just a passing hurt, but a deep psychological scar that shapes every relationship you will ever have. It turns the natural experience of connection into a relentless test, one you never asked to take, but one that feels impossible to opt out of. Imagine a child growing up hearing praise only when achievements shine, affection given only when behavior matches expectations. Over time, this child internalizes a dangerous belief that love is conditional, dependent on performance. This creates a cycle, an endless loop, where the self-worth of that individual becomes tied to external validation, a fragile currency that must be constantly earned, never simply accepted. The consequences of this are vast and complex. When love is earned, it is never free. It is a contract with invisible terms. Relationships become negotiations, alliances forged in the currency of approval. Every smile, every sign of affection feels like a reward, and every withdrawal like a punishment. This dynamic breeds anxiety, insecurity, and fear of abandonment, because the person learns to equate their value with the fleeting approval of others. They fear rejection not just as an event, but as a fundamental judgment of their worthiness to exist in love. Consider how this plays out in adulthood. A person carrying this belief will often find themselves testing the loyalty of their partners, friends, or family, consciously or unconsciously. They might become people pleasers, sacrificing their own needs to avoid the terrifying possibility of losing love. Or they might build walls, preemptively rejecting others before they can be rejected themselves, a painful defense mechanism. Even when love is offered freely, they may struggle to accept it without suspicion, because the lens through which they view love is always filtered by the assumption that it must be earned. A classic example is someone who constantly worries, am I good enough? Did I do enough? Should I say or do more to keep this love alive? This is not just insecurity. It is the echo of a childhood truth turned false doctrine. Love, the most essential human need, becomes a conditional achievement. Never a safe harbor, but a battlefield where worth is perpetually contested. Psychologically, this dynamic can trap people in cycles of self-sabotage. They might push loved ones away just to test if the love holds, proving it is real and not a fantasy. Or they might overextend themselves, burning out to meet impossible standards. And even when love is given generously, they might feel unworthy, doubting its sincerity. This dissonance tears at the soul. One poignant real-life illustration comes from the story of a young woman named Maya. Growing up, Maya's parents showed affection only when she excelled academically or behaved impeccably. Praise was a reward, not a given. As an adult, Maya found herself in a romantic relationship where she constantly sought reassurance, interpreting silence or distraction as signs of failing love. She worked tirelessly to be the perfect partner, but felt exhausted, never quite secure. Her love life became an exhausting exam she never wanted to take, but could never quit. Maya's story is not unique. Countless people live with the heavy burden of conditional love, carrying the invisible chains of earning, affection, and belonging. This burden shapes their identities, their decisions, and their capacity for intimacy. The deeper tragedy is how this belief is passed from generation to generation. Parents who themselves never felt unconditionally loved may unknowingly impose the same conditions on their children, perpetuating the cycle. Schools, cultures, and societies reinforce this message, valuing achievement and merit above innate human dignity and worth. The result is a collective psyche where love is scarce, transactional, and fragile. But there is hope. Recognizing this pattern is the first step toward healing. Understanding that love, at its core, is not something you earn, but something you allow yourself to receive, changes everything. It requires courage to dismantle the old scripts, to challenge the inner critic that demands proof of worthiness before affection. It means learning to accept oneself, flaws and all, and to trust that genuine love embraces imperfection. Therapies like attachment-based counseling highlight this fundamental human need for unconditional acceptance. They help individuals rewrite their narratives from "I must earn love" to "I am inherently worthy of love." This shift is not easy. It demands vulnerability, patience, and often the support of compassionate others. Imagine a world where the first message a child hears is, "You are lovable just because you exist." This simple truth, once internalized, can transform how that child relates to themselves and others. Love becomes a wellspring, not a well to be constantly refilled. Relationships become spaces of safety, not arenas of evaluation. Even for adults who carry the scars of conditional love, the journey to reclaiming unconditional self-worth is possible. It begins with noticing the patterns, confronting the fears, and slowly learning to trust love that does not demand a test. It involves breaking the loop, allowing love to flow freely without calculation or reservation. In the end, love must be a gift, not a prize. When we believe love must be earned, we trap ourselves in a prison of endless striving and inevitable doubt. But when we accept that love is our birthright, we open the door to genuine connection, deep intimacy, and true belonging. This realization is both a liberation and a call to action, to heal ourselves and to help heal those we love. To reject the false doctrine that love is conditional and instead embrace the radical truth that you were always lovable, always worthy, and always deserving of love simply because you are. This is not just a psychological concept. It is a profound human truth that echoes across cultures, histories, and lives. To truly be free, we must unlearn the old lessons and remember the simplest, most powerful truth. Love is not earned. Love is given. And it begins with loving yourself, without conditions, without tests, without hesitation. You deserve that love, and so does everyone you meet. Self-sacrifice is noble. You are often told that self-sacrifice is the highest form of nobility. From a young age, we absorb the idea that giving until it hurts is a virtue, an unquestionable moral duty that defines our character. Parents, teachers, religious leaders, and society at large praise those who put others first, even at great personal cost. Be selfless, they say. Put others before yourself. But what if this so-called nobility is actually a dangerous trap? What if the pain you endure becomes a currency that others freely spend, all while you slowly vanish, fading away into the background of their comfort and convenience? Imagine a candle burning brightly in a dark room. It gives its light generously, offering warmth and guidance to anyone nearby. But as it burns, the candle itself is consumed. It diminishes until nothing remains. This is the metaphor of self-sacrifice, giving light to others at the expense of your own existence. Yet, unlike a candle, a person has the capacity to regenerate, to replenish their energy and spirit. The problem arises when the giving is one-sided and endless, when the self-sacrifice is expected, demanded, and even exploited. Consider the parent who works tirelessly to provide for their children, sacrificing sleep, personal dreams, and social connections. They are hailed as heroes, but over time, the exhaustion, resentment, and isolation build up silently beneath the surface. Their identity narrows to the role of caregiver, the source of endless support. Friends may come and go, but the family's expectations never waver. The parent's pain becomes the foundation of the household's stability, a debt no one dares to repay or even acknowledge. The parent slowly disappears, not in death, but in loss of self. This dynamic is not limited to families. In friendships, romantic relationships, workplaces, and communities, self-sacrifice is wielded as both a virtue and a weapon. The colleague who stays late to cover for others may earn appreciation, but also risk burnout and invisibility beyond their work role. The partner who always compromises might be seen as loving, yet their own desires become invisible whispers drowned by the louder voices of others. The friend who listens to everyone's problems but never shares their own becomes a receptacle, a sponge absorbing all emotional labor without relief. In each case, the pain endured by the self-sacrificer is converted into a kind of social currency. Others spend this currency freely, expecting more and more sacrifices, while the giver is left impoverished in spirit. This is the paradox. The very act deemed noble can become a slow erasure of identity and vitality. The question we rarely ask is, who benefits from this arrangement, and at what cost? Let's examine cultural and historical contexts. Throughout history, societies have often valorized self-sacrifice in the name of duty, whether to family, nation, religion, or ideology. Soldiers are praised for sacrificing their lives in war, mothers for forsaking personal ambitions, activists for enduring hardship for a cause. These sacrifices are essential and sometimes heroic. But the problem arises when the ideal of self-sacrifice is weaponized to suppress boundaries and enforce control. For example, in some communities, women are expected to sacrifice their careers, health, and autonomy for the sake of family honor or cohesion. Their pain and labor are normalized as a price to pay, not questioned or compensated. Similarly, workers in low-paid, high-stress jobs often sacrifice mental and physical health because the narrative demands loyalty and selflessness, while the system reaps the profits. The noble ideal blinds us to exploitation and injustice. Another dimension is psychological and emotional. The person who sacrifices excessively may develop a subconscious pattern. They believe their worth depends on how much they give away. This leads to codependency, burnout, and loss of authentic self-expression. The pain becomes internalized guilt. If I stop sacrificing, I am selfish, unworthy, or a failure. This mental loop traps them, sometimes for decades, in a cycle that erodes their happiness and health. To illustrate, consider the story of Maya, a woman who spent 20 years caring for her aging parents, putting her own dreams aside. She sacrificed friendships, education, and relationships driven by duty and love. Yet, when her parents passed, Maya felt lost, disconnected from herself. She realized her identity had been shaped entirely by sacrifice, and rebuilding her life required learning to value her own needs. This journey was painful, but liberating, a reclaiming of self beyond sacrifice. So, what can we learn from this? The nobility of self-sacrifice must be re-examined. True strength and virtue come not from disappearing into others' needs, but from balanced generosity, where giving and receiving coexist. Boundaries are not selfish walls, but protective fences that keep the self alive. Saying no is an act of courage, not weakness. Valuing oneself is the foundation for sustainable love and care. Self-sacrifice becomes destructive only when it is unconditional, coerced, or unrecognized. When you give until it hurts, but no one notices the hurt, your sacrifice becomes a silent theft of your essence. Society must shift its narrative to honor not just the giver, but the whole human being, their dreams, health, and limits. If you recognize this pattern in your own life, know that stepping back is not betrayal, but survival. Healing begins with permission to value yourself, to refill your candle without guilt. Your worth is not measured by what you lose, but by who you are, whole and unbroken. In the end, self-sacrifice is not about disappearance into pain. It is about intentional, empowered giving that honors both self and others. Only then can true nobility shine, not as a fading candle, but as a radiant, enduring light. This deeper understanding transforms how we relate to ourselves and to each other. It invites us to redefine love, duty, and generosity, not as burdens, but as mutual exchanges that nurture and sustain life. Remember, your pain should never become currency for others. Your life is not a sacrifice to be spent, but a gift to be cherished. starting with yourself. You are your productivity. You are your productivity. This phrase, often whispered in the corridors of modern work culture, carries a heavy burden. It is a truth disguised as motivation, a lie wrapped in ambition. When you equate your worth solely with what you produce, your value becomes fragile, tethered not to who you are, but to how much you accomplish. This creates a relentless, grinding cycle where rest is not a pause, but a failure. You rest. And immediately the question surfaces. Am I wasting time? Am I falling behind? The silence of inactivity rings louder than the noise of constant doing. It's a trap so deep that collapsing from exhaustion is mistaken for dedication. The world praises the exhausted, glorifies the overworked, and dismisses the very human need to breathe, to simply be. This real-based event, this cultural phenomenon, is not just an abstract idea. It is the lived experience of millions worldwide. Consider the startup founder who works 14 hours a day, driven by the promise of success, only to collapse from burnout, yet is hailed as a visionary. Or the artist who must constantly create, post, perform, or risk vanishing from relevance. Or the office worker whose identity melts away when a project ends, leaving only a hollow sense of worth tied to spreadsheets and emails. In all these lives, productivity becomes a mask and a measure, a source of pride, and an abyss of anxiety. But why does this happen? Why is your value so intimately tied to your output? It begins in childhood, where achievement is often rewarded and failure punished. Grades, trophies, compliments all teach us that doing more equals being more. This lesson is reinforced in education systems that prioritize results over growth, and later in workplaces that measure humans as units of labor, not individuals with unique rhythms. The rise of social media amplifies this by showing curated highlights of others' achievements, triggering a compulsive comparison that fuels the productivity cult. Your worth becomes public, visible in the hours you work, the tasks you check off, the likes and shares you garner. The consequences are devastating. When your identity is so fused with your work, rest is seen as laziness, even betrayal. You push yourself past exhaustion, ignoring warning signs your body and mind send. Sleep becomes optional. Meals become fuel. Relationships become secondary. Mental health becomes a luxury. Yet, paradoxically, this forced dedication erodes the very creativity, energy, and clarity that productivity demands. The harder you push, the more brittle you become. Take the story of Maya, a young entrepreneur whose company soared for 3 years. She worked relentlessly, sleeping 4 hours a night, skipping meals, living on caffeine and sheer willpower. The world celebrated her hustle. But then, one day her body gave out. She fainted during a meeting, hospitalized for severe exhaustion and anxiety. Yet, even in recovery, the pressure to return was immense. Her worth, her identity, seemed locked to her output. Would she be valued if she slowed down? If she rested? The fear of being seen as less kept her trapped in this vicious cycle. Or think about Daniel, a writer whose mental health deteriorated because he equated his value with the number of words written daily. On bad days, the blank page became a mirror reflecting his worthlessness. On good days, the words poured out, a desperate attempt to prove himself, to himself and the world. The paradox was cruel. When he tried to rest, his mind rebelled, filled with guilt and fear that he was wasting time, that others were pulling ahead while he remained stagnant. This phenomenon is not just individual, it is systemic. Our societies reward output over presence, action over being. It is baked into economic models, cultural expectations, even laws and policies. The phrase "time is money" encapsulates this worldview, reducing human life to a ledger of productive hours. In this context, rest becomes a subversion, a radical act of reclaiming self-worth outside of measurable achievement. But there is a deeper cost, one that goes beyond tired bodies and weary minds. When your identity is chained to your productivity, you lose sight of your intrinsic humanity. You forget that your worth is not something to be earned or proven. It is not a reflection of how many emails you send, meetings you attend, or projects you complete. It is not a scorecard on a leaderboard. You are more than your output. Your value is inherent. It exists even when you do nothing, even when you rest. Yet, breaking free from this mindset is not easy. It requires dismantling internalized beliefs that have shaped you since childhood. resisting cultural pressures that praise burnout, and learning to listen to your body and soul. It means redefining success and worth on your own terms. Rest is not weakness. It is an essential part of your being. It is the soil where creativity, resilience, and well-being grow. When you allow yourself to rest, you create space for reflection, healing, and renewal. You reclaim your identity beyond what you produce. Imagine a world where you can pause without fear, where stepping back is not shameful but necessary. A world where dedication is not defined by exhaustion but by balance and presence. Where your worth is never questioned because it is never tied to fleeting output. This is not utopia. It is possible. It begins with awareness, a conscious choice to see yourself as a whole person, not just a worker or a doer. It means recognizing the toxic patterns that equate self-worth with output and choosing to unlearn them. If you feel trapped by the pressure to perform, know you are not alone. The voice that says you must keep going without rest is loud, but it is not the only voice. The quiet, steady voice of your true self urges you to slow down, to breathe, to exist beyond doing. Your worth is not a metric. It is a constant. When you accept this, the relentless cycle of burnout loses its grip. You find strength in stillness. You realize that sometimes the most productive thing you can do is rest. Remember, the world may celebrate the exhausted and call it dedication, but true dedication begins with honoring yourself, not your output. You are not your productivity. You are the person who produces, and that person deserves rest, compassion, and recognition just as much as any achievement. This truth is radical. It is revolutionary. It is the foundation of a sustainable life. So, next time you feel worthless for resting, remind yourself, your value is not defined by output. It is defined by your existence, and in that existence lies infinite worth. Fairness is guaranteed. You've been told that life is fair, that people get what they deserve, that if you work hard, play by the rules, and keep your head down, justice will find you. It's a belief so ingrained, so deeply woven into culture and consciousness, that questioning it feels almost rebellious. But what if this belief in guaranteed fairness is itself a barrier, a veil that blinds us to the real injustices around us? What if it shifts our gaze away from broken systems and onto those who suffer within them, turning victims into scapegoats while protecting the status quo? This idea that the world is just is powerful. It comforts us. It gives meaning to hardship. It tells us that effort and virtue will be rewarded and wrongdoing punished. But when reality does not align with this narrative, cognitive dissonance arises. To resolve this discomfort, many choose to blame the victim. They must have done something wrong. If they had tried harder, things would be different. Justice was served. This psychological mechanism protects our worldview, but silences empathy. Consider the example of poverty. People living in impoverished conditions are often seen as lazy or irresponsible, rather than victims of systemic inequality, historical marginalization, or economic exploitation. When someone loses their job, the default assumption is failure, not structural collapse or discrimination. Students from underfunded schools are labeled as unmotivated, instead of the education system being examined for bias and neglect. These narratives are easier to accept than confronting uncomfortable truths about racism, classism, or political corruption. The belief in fairness extends into the legal system too. When a person is convicted, many accept it as proof of guilt and justice served, even when evidence points to bias, wrongful convictions, or flawed procedures. The justice system is supposed to be blind, but in practice, it often reflects societal prejudices. Yet the myth of fairness prevents widespread questioning or reform, because admitting unfairness would unravel the very foundation of trust. This blindness has consequences far beyond individual judgment. It influences policy, social attitudes, and resource allocation. When victims are blamed, there is less public will to address root causes, less support for welfare programs, criminal justice reform, or educational equity. The system remains rigged, protected by a collective refusal to see its faults. History offers stark illustrations. Consider segregation in the United States. For decades, systemic racism was justified by the belief that the social order was natural and just. Laws, violence, and discrimination were rationalized by blaming those oppressed for their failings. It took courageous movements and inconvenient truths to expose and challenge these injustices. Even in today's world, the same patterns persist. When disasters strike, natural or man-made, the vulnerable are often blamed for poor choices or lack of preparation, rather than the failure of infrastructure, governance, or economic disparity. Refugees fleeing conflict face suspicion and stigma, accused of abandoning responsibility. The myth of fairness silences their stories and obscures the complex realities they endure. The psychology behind this belief is understandable but dangerous. It protects our sense of control in a chaotic world. It gives order to randomness, but it also numbs compassion and obstructs justice. Breaking free from this illusion demands courage. It requires recognizing that life is rarely fair, and that fairness is a goal, not a given. It means listening deeply to those who suffer and questioning whose interests are served by maintaining the myth of justice. It means advocating for systems that acknowledge inequality and strive to correct it, rather than punishing those who fall through the cracks. This does not mean abandoning hope or personal responsibility. It means balancing belief in fairness with a clear-eyed understanding of systemic barriers. It means creating communities where empathy triumphs over judgment, and justice is actively pursued rather than passively assumed. If you find yourself blaming victims or assuming fairness where it doesn't exist, pause and reflect. Ask why. Whose story are you hearing? Whose power are you protecting? Because when fairness is assumed, injustice hides in plain sight. And until we see it clearly, justice will remain an ideal, distant, fragile, and unfulfilled. Rules define morality. You were taught that being good means obeying the rules. From childhood, the lesson is drilled into your bones. Follow the laws, respect authority, conform to society's codes. Goodness is measured by compliance, by adherence to prescribed norms. This belief seems straightforward, even comforting. It offers a clear map for right and wrong, a simple way to avoid chaos. But beneath this surface lies a dark paradox. When morality is reduced to obedience, cruelty finds its perfect disguise. Imagine a world where rules are absolute, unquestionable. In such a world, the individual's conscience is muted, replaced by the external voice of authority. The policeman enforcing unjust orders, the soldier carrying out inhumane commands, the bureaucrat administering cruel policies. All can justify their actions simply by pointing to the rule book. I was only following orders. This phrase, haunting in its simplicity, reveals how morality defined by rules can become a tool for oppression. History offers grim lessons in this truth. During the darkest chapters of humanity, people hid behind uniforms and laws to commit atrocities. They wore badges and wielded legal authority, presenting cruelty as duty, obedience as virtue. The machinery of evil operated under the guise of order and discipline, while individuals silenced their own moral doubts. When you believe that good is merely obeying, you surrender your power to question, to resist, to discern right from wrong beyond what is written. Rules can be created by flawed, selfish, or cruel minds. Laws have been passed to justify slavery, segregation, genocide, and oppression. Obedience to these laws did not make those who enforced them good. It made them complicit. The illusion that morality resides in conformity blinds societies to injustice, allowing evil to wear the mask of legitimacy. Smiling authority figures become the face of compliance, while behind them, cruelty flourishes unchecked. This belief also erodes personal responsibility. When you see yourself as simply a follower of rules, you abdicate the moral agency that defines true goodness. You become a cog in a machine, shifting blame to higher powers, to written codes, to what must be done. But true morality is not obedience, it is discernment. It requires the courage to ask difficult questions. Are these rules just? Do they protect the vulnerable or empower the powerful? When laws conflict with compassion, which should prevail, the danger of equating good with obedience is also visible in everyday life. In workplaces, schools, communities, rules can become tools of control rather than guides to fairness. Harsh policies enforced without empathy breed resentment, silence dissent, and suppress individuality. When compliance becomes the ultimate moral virtue, creativity, critical thinking, and ethical judgment are stifled. People learn to follow blindly rather than to act with conscience. Yet, there is a path beyond this trap. Morality rooted in obedience is a limited map, but morality grounded in empathy, justice, and critical reflection is boundless. It calls for active engagement with the world, not passive acceptance. It demands listening to the suffering of others, challenging unjust systems, and standing up even when authority commands silence. This is the morality of true courage, the courage to resist cruelty disguised as order. In moments of crisis, some have chosen conscience over conformity, whistleblowers exposing corruption, activists fighting oppressive laws, ordinary people sheltering the persecuted. These acts illuminate the truth that goodness is an active choice, not a passive rule-following. They remind us that moral strength lies in questioning, in challenging, in refusing to obey when obedience becomes complicity. You were never meant to see goodness as simple obedience. That belief confines you to a world where cruelty hides behind smiles, where uniforms and laws become masks for injustice. Real morality is messier, harder, but infinitely more powerful. It is the voice inside that says no to wrong, even when everyone else says yes. It is the courage to act from conscience, not convenience. So when you face rules that demand obedience at the cost of compassion, remember this. Obedience is not the measure of goodness. True morality demands awareness, courage, and the willingness to stand against cruelty, even when it comes clothed in the garments of authority, because the greatest acts of good often begin where rules end. Doubt means disloyalty. You learned early on that doubt is not a sign of curiosity or wisdom, but a dangerous act of disloyalty. To question authority, to question the rules, or even your own feelings, was framed as betrayal, a breaking of trust so severe it could fracture relationships, families, and communities. This lesson instills a deep, often unconscious fear of doubt, pushing you to silence your own instincts, suppress your gut feelings, and swallow uncertainty in favor of obedience. When doubt becomes synonymous with disloyalty, you enter a paradoxical prison. The very capacity that could save you, the ability to question, to reflect, to challenge, is demonized. Instead of engaging with the world through your own insight, you defer to external control, convinced that being good means submission, compliance, and surrendering your internal compass. This dynamic is profoundly damaging. It teaches you to distrust your own mind and body, the very instruments designed to keep you safe and true to yourself. Your gut, that instinctive radar for danger and truth, becomes silenced or ignored because to listen is to risk being labeled a traitor. Over time, this leads to a numbing of awareness, a deep internal conflict where what you feel clashes with what you should believe or do. For example, imagine someone in a toxic relationship who senses something wrong, unease, subtle red flags, but doubts themselves because the partner insists that questioning their behavior is disloyal, a betrayal of the relationship. So they silence their doubts, dismiss their feelings, and stay trapped deeper and deeper. This pattern often repeats across contexts, families, workplaces, social groups, where conformity is prized over authenticity. The psychological consequences are immense. Suppressing doubt creates cognitive dissonance, stress, and anxiety. You may find yourself constantly second-guessing, yet afraid to speak out. You become hypervigilant to avoid triggering suspicion, always walking a tightrope between your own truth and imposed loyalty. This tension erodes self-trust and fosters emotional paralysis. On a broader scale, societies that conflate doubt with disloyalty often become rigid and authoritarian, stifling innovation, dialogue, and progress. History shows how dangerous it is when populations are taught to reject questioning as betrayal, because without doubt, critical thinking withers and power goes unchecked. Yet doubt itself is not disloyalty. Doubt is a vital part of discernment and growth. It fuels learning, deepens understanding, and protects integrity. The challenge is to reclaim doubt as a loyal companion to truth, rather than an enemy. Healing from this requires unlearning the toxic equation of doubt with betrayal. It means nurturing the courage to listen to your gut, to voice your questions, and to embrace uncertainty as a space for insight rather than fear. It calls for creating environments, both internal and external, where doubt is welcomed, respected, and valued. When doubt is freed from the chains of disloyalty, it becomes a powerful tool for authenticity and liberation. You begin to trust yourself again, to honor your inner voice, and to resist control that demands blind obedience. Doubt transforms from a silent, suffocating weight into a clarion call for freedom and truth. In the end, Questioning is not betrayal. It is the highest form of loyalty to yourself, to those you love, and to the deeper values that sustain genuine connection and growth. To doubt is to be alive, awake, and engaged, not a traitor, but a guardian of your own soul. This is the painful, powerful paradox that many must navigate, breaking free from the fear that doubt means disloyalty, and stepping into a life where questioning becomes a courageous act of love and truth. Comfort means safety. You spend so much of your life chasing comfort, equating it with peace and safety. The familiar routines, the known faces, the predictable patterns, they feel like shields against chaos and pain. When life overwhelms, retreating into comfort seems like the natural, even the wise choice. But what if that very comfort is a carefully constructed trap? What if the safety you cling to isn't freedom at all, but a cage designed to keep you small, stagnant, and disconnected from your true potential? Think about it. Comfort is not inherently bad. It's the feeling of ease, of security, that lets you breathe without constant fear or stress. It feels like home, like a warm blanket on a cold night. But comfort becomes dangerous when it morphs into a prison, when it turns into the default zone you refuse to leave. This zone lulls you into habits that dull your senses and shrink your horizons. Our brains are wired to seek comfort because it conserves energy and reduces uncertainty. But evolution never guaranteed that comfort would lead to growth. In fact, growth often demands discomfort, challenge, and risk. If you stay in the same job, the same town, the same mindset just because it's easy, you trade the unknown pain of change for a slow suffocation of your potential. Look at the stories of people who chose comfort over growth. Maybe it's the artist who stopped creating because the fear of failure was too great, so they settled for a safe, uninspired life. Or the friend who never speaks up about their true feelings, preferring the quiet stability of superficial connection over the vulnerability of authenticity. Or the worker who tolerates toxic environments because quitting feels too risky. These are lives paused, potential untapped, and dreams deferred, all because comfort was mistaken for peace. Comfort breeds habits, habits that reinforce your current identity, your known limitations, your existing worldview. It builds walls, not bridges. It whispers, "Stay here, it's safe," even as the horizon calls you to explore, to expand, to evolve. The paradox is cruel. The more you seek comfort, the smaller you become. The cage tightens, even if it feels soft. Real peace is not the absence of discomfort, but the courage to face uncertainty, the willingness to step beyond the familiar and risk failure. Growth is born in the tension between who you are and who you could be. It requires shaking the foundations of comfort to build something stronger, more expansive, more true. Consider the butterfly, trapped inside its cocoon. That cocoon is comfort and safety, a place where transformation is possible but also constrained. The butterfly must struggle to emerge, breaking free from the cozy prison to realize its wings and soar. Without that struggle, it remains small, unseen, and incomplete. So ask yourself, is your comfort a sanctuary or a trap? Are you clinging to the familiar because it nurtures you, or because it shields you from fear? What parts of your life have you sacrificed in the name of comfort? What dreams have you buried because they demanded too much uncertainty? To grow, you must embrace discomfort as a sign of life. You must be willing to lose what feels safe to gain what feels true. This is not reckless abandonment, but intentional surrender, a choice to trade the illusion of safety for authentic freedom. Comfort is tempting because it feels like peace, but real peace is the calm that follows courage, the quiet strength that rises after storms of change. If you stay trapped in comfort, you may survive, but you will never truly live. Your life is not meant to be small or safe. It is meant to be vast, daring, and wild. The path to that life begins the moment you choose growth over comfort, challenge over habit, and transformation over stagnation. Remember, comfort is a place, not a destination. Safety is a feeling, not a prison. And peace is found not in avoiding pain, but in embracing the full spectrum of life's uncertainties with an open heart. So break free from the trap of comfort. Chase not familiarity, but possibility. The unknown is where your true peace awaits. Success means you're good. You see success, wealth, power, fame, as the ultimate proof of virtue. This belief, deeply embedded in many cultures and societies, shapes how we judge others and justify actions that might otherwise seem harmful or wrong. When someone is rich or powerful, their actions are often excused, admired, or rationalized, no matter the consequences for others. It's a real, pervasive event in human history and psychology, a mental shortcut that conflates success with goodness. This happens because success is visible and measurable. Wealth sparkles like a trophy. Power commands attention and respect. It's easier to assume that such visible markers must come from virtue, hard work, intelligence, moral superiority, than to question the complexities behind them. We want to believe the world is fair, that good people rise and bad people fall. This belief comforts us, but blinds us. Take, for example, historical figures whose legacies are coated with gold but shadowed by cruelty. Kings and tycoons wielded vast power, justifying wars, exploitation, or oppression because their status declared them worthy. Their wealth or fame became a shield, a seal of approval that allowed harm to be overlooked or minimized. Even today, successful celebrities or CEOs often receive a pass for unethical behavior simply because their achievements suggest they are better people. The richer or more confident someone is, the more we rationalize their mistakes or wrongdoings. It becomes a moral paradox, where the harm they cause is justified by their status, while the same harm by others would be condemned. This belief is dangerous because it distorts morality. It allows injustice to flourish unchecked under the guise of success. It teaches us to admire results over processes, outcomes over ethics. It whispers that ends justify means if you wear the crown of success. But the truth is more complex. Success does not guarantee virtue. Many who are wealthy or powerful achieved it through manipulation, cruelty, or stepping over others. Conversely, those who act with deep morality and kindness may remain unseen, unwealthy, or powerless. Success and goodness are not synonyms. Understanding this distinction is crucial for breaking cycles of harm and inequality. It asks us to look beyond surface achievements and question the true cost of success. It challenges us to hold all individuals accountable, regardless of their status. If we accept that wealth or power alone proves virtue, we risk excusing harm and perpetuating systems of injustice. But if we see success as a complex outcome, sometimes built on questionable foundations, we open the door to deeper justice and empathy. So next time you admire success, remember to look beyond the shine. Ask not only who achieved it, but how, and at what cost. Because true virtue is not measured by wealth or power, but by the impact one leaves on the world and others. Education equals intelligence. You've been taught to believe that education equals intelligence, that degrees are the ultimate proof of wisdom, and that knowledge is measured by diplomas, transcripts, and the prestige of institutions. It's a straightforward idea. Go to school, learn the curriculum, graduate with honors, and the world will open its doors. But what if this belief is only part of the story? What if real insight often grows not in lecture halls or libraries, but from pain, silence, and rebellion? What if institutions, despite their promise, sometimes fail to nurture true understanding, creativity, and wisdom? The narrative that equates formal education with intelligence is powerful. It shapes how society values people and their ideas. It influences hiring, respect, and opportunities. But intelligence is not a certificate. It is not confined to syllabi or measured by exams. Intelligence is messy, lived, and often born from experience that institutions overlook, or even suppress. Consider the countless thinkers, artists, and innovators who thrived outside traditional educational paths. The rebel poets who gave voice to the silenced. The inventors who failed in classrooms but succeeded in workshops. The activists who learned the hard truths of injustice not from textbooks, but from the streets. Their wisdom was forged in struggle, reflection, and defiance, not in classrooms. Pain teaches lessons that textbooks cannot. It sharpens empathy, fuels resilience, and challenges assumptions. When someone endures loss, hardship, or isolation, they gain perspectives that no curriculum can replicate. Silence, too, holds power. In moments without noise or distraction, insight takes root, reflection deepens. Inner worlds expand beyond the limits of external instruction. Rebellion is the crucible of change. Questioning authority, challenging norms, and breaking free from imposed narratives drive growth. Institutions, by design, often preserve order and tradition. They reward conformity and standardization. Well, while essential for some forms of learning, this can stifle originality and critical thought. Real wisdom requires questioning the very foundations of what is taught. Even within education, the richest learning often happens in the margins. The student who struggles with rules but discovers passion. The teacher who encourages questions over answers. The classroom debates that ignite minds beyond rote memorization. Yet, for many, education remains a checkbox, pursued for credentials rather than understanding. This illusion has consequences. It marginalizes voices without formal qualifications, dismissing valuable lived knowledge. It pressures students into narrow definitions of success, ignoring diverse intelligences, emotional, social, practical, and creative. It fuels anxiety and imposter syndrome among those who don't fit the mold. True intelligence is multidimensional. It embraces curiosity, courage, and humility. It thrives on experiences that education cannot package neatly. It grows in silence as much as in speech, in failure as much as in success, in rebellion as much as in obedience. So, next time you measure someone's wisdom by their degree, pause. Remember that the world's greatest insights often come from those who have walked paths less traveled, who have questioned and endured beyond textbooks. Recognize that pain, silence, and rebellion are teachers in their own right, because education can open doors, but intelligence builds new ones. Love fixes everything. You were told that love fixes everything, that love is the ultimate healer, the answer to every wound, the light that dissolves darkness. From fairy tales to family stories, from movies to whispered advice, this message has been etched into your heart. Love has the power to mend what's broken, to transform even the most shattered soul. It sounds beautiful. It feels hopeful. But beneath this comforting illusion lies a painful truth. Love alone does not fix everything. Sometimes it only binds you more tightly to what drains you. Love is not magic. Love is not a cure-all. It is not a sacred bandage you can wrap around any brokenness and expect it to disappear. This belief that love can heal anyone is a powerful story, but it is also a trap. It keeps you chained to people who refuse to change, who suck your energy, who feed off your hope while their pain remains untouched. It turns your compassion into a leash, your patience into a prison. Think about the relationships where you gave everything: time, care, forgiveness, hoping that love would be enough to break through walls of addiction, anger, neglect, or cruelty. You told yourself, if only they felt your love deeply enough, if only you loved harder, they would heal, they would change. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes love becomes a one-sided effort, a silent sacrifice that slowly erodes your own light. This belief can blind you to reality. You may excuse harmful behavior as just part of their struggle. You may ignore red flags because you believe love can overcome them. You stay when leaving would be safer. You hope when the truth is pain. You invest hope where only damage grows, and all the while, your own needs, your own boundaries, your own well-being fade into the background. Love is a force of connection, but connection requires reciprocity. Healing requires willingness. Change requires effort from both sides. If you hold on to love as a talisman, believing it alone can fix someone else, you surrender your power. You accept being the healer without being healed. You carry a burden that was never yours to bear alone. This is not to say love has no power. Love can inspire transformation. It can offer comfort. It can be a catalyst for growth. But love without boundaries, love without self-respect, love that ignores harm is not love. It is self-deception. It is a lie that keeps you tethered to the broken, while they continue to drain you, leaving you diminished, exhausted, and invisible. The most radical act of love you can offer yourself is to recognize your limits, to understand that your light is precious and must be protected, to know that sometimes the kindest choice is to step away, not because you stopped loving, but because loving wisely means loving yourself first. Healing is a journey for each person to walk, not a burden you must carry for them. Love that fixes everything is a beautiful myth, but the truth is more complex, more real, and ultimately more freeing. Real love sees brokenness but does not become its prisoner. Real love knows when to hold on and when to let go. Real love shines brightest when it radiates from a place of respect, balance, and care, for yourself as much as for others. You deserve love that uplifts you, not love that chains you. You deserve relationships where healing is mutual, growth is shared, and light flows freely both ways. And when love cannot fix everything, you have the strength to walk away, carrying your own light, whole and unbroken. Kindness guarantees kindness. You grow up believing that kindness begets kindness, that if you offer warmth, generosity, and trust, the world will mirror those gifts back to you. This idea feels pure, comforting, and deeply human. It's a hopeful script. Behave well, and others will do the same. But beneath this hopeful narrative lies a harsh and unsettling truth. Kindness does not always guarantee kindness in return. Sometimes, it makes you vulnerable to those who wear smiles as masks, predators lurking beneath friendly faces. When you extend your heart with openness and expect reciprocity, you enter into a delicate social contract. You believe your good intentions will be met with respect, gratitude, and care. Yet, the world is far more complex. Some exploit kindness as a weakness, using it as bait to manipulate, deceive, or control. The predator knows how to mimic warmth perfectly, their smile polished and convincing, hiding ruthless intentions. This dynamic can shatter your trust. You may find yourself repeatedly giving, emotionally, physically, mentally, only to be met with betrayal, indifference, or cruelty. The pain of such experiences cuts deep because it's not just about loss. It's a fundamental challenge to your worldview. If kindness doesn't guarantee kindness, then what can you rely on? How do you protect yourself without becoming cold and guarded? Take the example of a person named Raj. Raj always believed in helping others, offering support without expecting anything back. But time and again, he encountered people who took advantage, friends who borrowed without returning favors, colleagues who exploited his generosity, strangers who manipulated his goodwill. Raj's warmth became a door left open for exploitation. Slowly, his hope dimmed, replaced by caution and skepticism. This is the paradox of kindness in a world that is not always kind. It demands both generosity and discernment. It calls for a balance between vulnerability and wisdom, openness and boundaries. Kindness without awareness can feed the very predators it seeks to disarm. Psychologically, this creates tension. On one hand, you want to remain true to your compassionate nature. On the other, you crave protection from being used or hurt. Learning this balance is an essential journey, one that does not mean abandoning kindness, but refining it. Kindness anchored in discernment becomes a powerful, not passive force. Kindness with no boundaries can lead to burnout, resentment, and loss of self. But kindness that understands the world's complexity can protect both heart and soul. It teaches you to recognize the difference between genuine warmth and manipulative charm, to trust but verify, to give without losing yourself. The hardest lesson is this: not everyone deserves your kindness. This is not a call for cynicism, but for clarity. It invites you to cultivate empathy with caution, generosity with boundaries, and love with strength. Imagine a world where kindness is both fierce and tender, where warmth is shielded by wisdom. Such kindness doesn't guarantee reciprocity from everyone, but it guarantees respect for your own worth and safety. This awareness is a profound act of self-love. It frees you from the naive expectation that kindness always returns in kind, replacing it with a mature trust in your ability to navigate the world's complexities. In the end, kindness remains one of the most powerful gifts you can offer, but it must be wielded with eyes wide open, because kindness without boundaries can feed predators, but kindness with discernment nurtures resilience, connection, and true compassion. You deserve to be kind, and you deserve to be safe. Authority deserves respect. You were taught from a very young age that authority deserves respect, that titles and positions are not just labels, but badges of honor, deserving reverence by default. Respect your elders, respect your teachers, respect the police, respect the leaders. These lessons are drilled into you so deeply that questioning authority often feels like a betrayal, a dangerous act of rebellion. But what if that very respect for authority, when given without scrutiny, becomes the foundation for blind obedience? What if the system uses your learned reverence to command silence, obedience, and compliance, even when the order itself causes harm? When respect is divorced from the actions behind the title, you become a silent participant in injustice. Authority, by design, is meant to maintain order. It's meant to create systems where chaos is kept at bay, where society functions smoothly. Titles, uniforms, and ranks symbolize a structure that promises security and trustworthiness. But history and experience show us a darker truth. Authority is a tool, and like any tool, it can be wielded for both protection and oppression. When society teaches you to respect authority because of status alone, you are being conditioned to obey first and ask questions later. This can be deadly. Look back at the countless historical moments where this unquestioning obedience led to catastrophic outcomes. People obeyed orders during wars, even when those orders meant committing atrocities. Entire populations remained silent or complicit because they were told to respect and obey those in power. The phrase "just following orders" became a shield for cruelty. The reverence for authority blinded individuals from recognizing the immorality of actions commanded by those above them. In this way, respect for titles without accountability becomes an enabler of harm. This pattern isn't confined to the past. It is deeply embedded in modern systems too. In workplaces, a boss's word is often law, no matter how unjust their decisions may be. In schools, teachers wield authority unquestioned, sometimes fostering silence even when students suffer. Governments enforce laws with the assumption that officials deserve unquestioned respect, yet sometimes those laws are unjust, discriminatory, or abusive. The danger lies in mistaking authority's facade for virtue. When respect is automatic, when silence is expected, a dangerous power imbalance forms. You are taught that challenging authority is disrespectful, disloyal, or disruptive. So, you keep quiet, even when you witness injustice. This silence doesn't protect you or society. It protects the system and those who benefit from the status quo. The order you are told to obey becomes a mask hiding harm, while your silence is mistaken for virtue. But real respect is not blind. True respect is earned through consistent moral actions. Authority that commands respect should also command accountability. When those in power act justly, transparently, and with empathy, they deserve deference. But when authority abuses power, spreads fear, or enforces injustice, respect must be withdrawn. To respect action over position is to uphold justice over hierarchy. Understanding this distinction is crucial because it empowers you to reclaim your voice. Obedience without question is not obedience, it is submission. Submission without scrutiny is complicity. The moment you begin to evaluate authority based on deeds rather than titles, you reclaim moral agency. You become not a passive subject, but an active participant in the social contract. Consider the whistleblowers who speak out against corruption, abuse, or injustice. They often face backlash, ostracization, and punishment precisely because they challenge authority revered without question. Their courage highlights the tension between respect for authority and respect for truth. Their resistance exposes the cracks in the facade of unquestioned obedience and reminds us that silence is not always golden. It can be deadly. In the personal sphere, this dynamic manifests as well. Families, friendships, and communities can wield authority in subtle ways that silence and control rather than nurture and support. A parent's word might be law. A partner's demands might go unquestioned. A social norm might enforce compliance. Learning to differentiate when authority serves justice and when it enforces harm is a lifelong challenge. It requires courage to question, to speak up, and sometimes to disobey. Your conscience becomes the true compass in this journey. Respecting authority is not a license to surrender your ethics. Silence is not a virtue when it protects abusers. Order is meaningless if it perpetuates injustice. The challenge lies in balancing respect for structure with unwavering demand for accountability. Imagine a society where authority is continually questioned and held accountable, where respect is granted only to those who prove themselves worthy through ethical action. Such a society fosters transparency, empathy, and justice. It values the voice of every individual, recognizing that true order emerges not from fear or blind obedience, but from trust earned by integrity. In closing, remember this: authority deserves respect only insofar as it serves justice, protects the vulnerable, and upholds truth. Respecting titles without questioning actions hands over your power and silences your voice. Silence in the face of harm is not virtue, it is surrender. To live freely and morally is to respect not the position, but the person and the actions they take. It is to honor accountability above hierarchy and to understand that true order comes from justice, not fear. Your voice is your power. Never let the illusion of authority mute your conscience. Speak, question, resist when needed, because justice depends on those who refuse to be silent. Titles are symbols, but actions are the true measure of respect. Dreams always come true. Then dreams always come true. This phrase echoes through our culture like a sacred mantra. From childhood, we are told that if we simply persist, if we work hard enough, if we never give up, our dreams will manifest. It is a comforting belief, a beacon of hope in a world that often feels unpredictable and unfair. But beneath this hopeful message lies a deeper, more painful truth. A truth about the invisible barriers, the doors that were never open to us in the first place, no matter how much we knock or how fiercely we persist. The idea that persistence always wins is powerful because it offers control. It suggests that success is entirely within your reach, resting solely on your willingness to try harder. But life is not always so simple. Sometimes, no amount of persistence can open doors that were never meant to open for you, because of systemic inequalities, social barriers, or circumstances beyond your control. This reality is often hidden behind the glittering narrative of never giving up, making failure feel like a personal shortcoming rather than a structural issue. Consider the story of Marcus, a talented young man from a marginalized community who dreamed of becoming a lawyer. He studied tirelessly, passed exams, and applied to numerous law firms, but doors kept closing. His resume was flawless, but he was repeatedly rejected, not because of lack of persistence or talent, but because of bias and exclusion rooted in the system. The belief that dreams always come true through persistence did not shield him from the reality that some gates remain locked, regardless of effort. Or take Sarah, an aspiring artist whose dream was to showcase her work in prestigious galleries. She painted every day, networked tirelessly, attended every event, and sent out countless applications. Yet, despite her dedication, the elite art world's gatekeepers often dismissed her because of her background and connections, or lack thereof. Persistence was necessary, but not sufficient. The doors to success were controlled by unseen forces, and no amount of personal determination could dismantle those barriers alone. This belief also quietly blames those who do not achieve their dreams. It suggests that if you fail, it's because you didn't try hard enough, weren't persistent enough, or lacked the right mindset. This blame ignores the complex realities many face: economic hardship, discrimination, lack of opportunity, or mental and physical health challenges. The narrative erases the structural and social dimensions of success and failure, reducing everything to individual willpower. Moreover, the glorification of persistence often pushes people into unhealthy extremes. Endless grinding, ignoring burnout, sacrificing well-being, all in the name of chasing dreams. When the doors remain closed despite relentless effort, it leads to exhaustion, despair, and sometimes giving up entirely. The pain of persistent failure becomes not just personal, but existential, questioning one's worth and the fairness of life itself. Yet, acknowledging these barriers does not mean abandoning hope or giving up on dreams. Instead, it invites a more nuanced understanding, one that recognizes both personal effort and external realities. It calls for compassion toward ourselves and others when doors stay shut, despite persistence. It encourages collective action to change the structures that keep doors locked and widen the opportunities for all. Imagine a world where the narrative shifts. Not just dreams always come true if you persist, but dreams require persistence, yes, but also fairness, access, and support. A world where society actively works to open doors that have long been closed to many, where success is not only about individual grit, but also about dismantling systemic barriers. This does not diminish the value of persistence. Persistence is vital. It is the fuel that drives innovation, art, social change, and personal growth. But it is not a magic key that fits every lock. Sometimes, the lock is designed to keep certain people out, no matter how hard they try. If you feel trapped by relentless effort without progress, remember, it is not a failure of your spirit, but often a sign of deeper issues. Recognizing that some doors were never open to you is painful, but liberating. It frees you from self-blame and opens the possibility to seek new paths or to join forces with others to change the system. Success and dreams are complex tapestries woven from effort, opportunity, support, and sometimes luck. To believe dreams always come true through persistence alone is to see only part of the picture, a picture that leaves many invisible, unheard, and excluded. So, honor your persistence, but also honor the reality of the barriers you face. Be kind to yourself if the door stays closed. And remember, changing the locks, breaking down walls, and building new doors. This is the work that turns dreams into reality for everyone, not just the persistent few. Dreams do matter, persistence matters, but fairness, opportunity, and collective action matter just as much. This is the deeper truth behind the myth, that dreams always come true. And in that truth lies the power not only to persist, but to transform the world. Discomfort is always bad. You've been told that discomfort is always bad, that pain signals failure, a sign that something has gone wrong. It's natural to want to avoid discomfort, to seek safety, ease, and pleasure instead. But what if this fear of pain isn't just an instinct for survival, but a barrier to your own evolution? What if discomfort is not the enemy, but the birthplace of growth? And what if the belief that discomfort is bad keeps you running from the very changes that could transform your life? Throughout history, discomfort has been painted as a negative state to escape. Advertisements promise comfort and convenience. Self-help books encourage eliminating pain and stress. Our culture glorifies comfort zones as safe havens. Yet, in this quest for ease, we often lose sight of the paradox. Meaningful growth requires struggle. Discomfort signals that you are on the edge of your current limits. It demands adaptation, reflection, and sometimes painful transformation. Take the example of physical exercise. Muscles tear and ache during intense workouts. Yet this discomfort is essential for building strength and endurance. Without pushing through soreness and fatigue, no progress occurs. Similarly, emotional growth involves confronting uncomfortable truths, facing fears, regrets, and vulnerabilities. It's painful, but necessary. Denying or avoiding this discomfort leaves wounds unhealed and potential unrealized. Consider the journey of Nelson Mandela, who endured decades of imprisonment and hardship. His discomfort was immense: physical pain, isolation, injustice. But through that suffering, he evolved into a leader of profound wisdom and resilience. His growth emerged from embracing discomfort, not fleeing it. Imagine if he had surrendered to pain as failure. History might have been very different. In personal lives, too, discomfort plays a critical role. Ending toxic relationships, changing careers, or confronting addiction often triggers intense pain and uncertainty. Yet these upheavals are catalysts for transformation. People who avoid discomfort to cling to familiarity may feel safe temporarily, but they stunt their growth, living lives half-lived. Modern neuroscience confirms this. Discomfort activates stress responses, yes, but it also stimulates neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, form new connections, and learn. Growth literally happens when you move beyond comfort. The release of cortisol and adrenaline prepares you to face challenges. The discomfort of uncertainty opens new cognitive pathways. But cultural narratives complicate this truth. We are often taught to chase comfort and avoid pain at all costs. When discomfort arises, we label ourselves weak or broken. We medicate, distract, or numb our feelings. Social media amplifies this, offering curated images of perfect, effortless lives. We compare our struggles to others' highlights, deepening our fear of discomfort. This creates a vicious cycle. Fear of discomfort leads to avoidance, which leads to stagnation, which breeds dissatisfaction and despair. The very thing we fear becomes the barrier to fulfillment. Breaking free requires a paradigm shift. To see discomfort not as a sign of failure, but as a signal of growth. To embrace pain as a teacher, not a punishment. To reframe challenges as opportunities for evolution. This doesn't mean seeking suffering unnecessarily. It means recognizing that discomfort is inevitable in meaningful change, and learning to face it with courage and compassion. Mindfulness, meditation, and therapy can help build tolerance and understanding of discomfort, transforming fear into strength. Think of a butterfly struggling out of its cocoon. The discomfort of that struggle is essential to developing wings strong enough to fly. Without it, the butterfly remains trapped, undeveloped. Your own evolution works the same way. The path of growth is seldom smooth. It winds through valleys of uncertainty and peaks of pain, but on the other side lies transformation, greater resilience, wisdom, and freedom. So, next time discomfort knocks, don't shut the door. Don't label it as failure. Welcome it as a herald of your becoming, because discomfort is not your enemy, it is your guide. And only by walking through it can you become who you were meant to be. Belief equals truth. You were trained to believe that your ideas were who you are, that your beliefs were not just opinions, but the very essence of your identity. From a young age, you learned to defend your ideas as if they were shields protecting your selfhood. To question them was to question yourself. To change them was to lose yourself. This is the trap of equating belief with truth. When the world shifts, when facts evolve, when new realities emerge, you don't adapt. Instead, you collapse. This connection between belief and identity creates a rigid fortress around your mind. It feels safe. It feels necessary. But it is also a prison. When your beliefs become your armor, every challenge to those beliefs feels like an attack on your very being. This can trigger defensiveness, denial, and even aggression. The discomfort of doubt becomes unbearable because doubting feels like unraveling. And so, instead of opening to change, you cling harder to the beliefs you hold. Consider the psychology behind this. Identity fusion with belief is powerful because it satisfies a deep human need for certainty and belonging. When your beliefs define you, they become intertwined with your social groups, your values, and your self-worth. Changing a belief is not just a mental shift. It threatens social bonds, emotional stability, and personal meaning. It demands confronting cognitive dissonance, that painful state where reality clashes with conviction. Take, for example, someone who has long believed in a particular political ideology, religious doctrine, or scientific understanding. When new evidence or perspectives challenge that belief, the natural instinct is often to reject or discredit that evidence rather than reassess the belief. The cost of admitting error is too high. It shakes the foundation of their identity and risks alienation from their community. This leads to polarization, conflict, and stagnation. This phenomenon is not just theoretical, it plays out across history and personal lives. Societies have resisted scientific discoveries that contradict established dogma, from Galileo's heliocentric theory to the theory of evolution. Entire communities have clung to outdated narratives because accepting new truths felt like losing a part of themselves. On a personal level, relationships break down when individuals refuse to question long-held beliefs, unable to evolve alongside changing realities. When belief equals truth, growth becomes impossible. Adaptation requires flexibility, the ability to revise your understanding in light of new information. But rigidity born from identity-linked beliefs blocks this process. Instead of learning and evolving, you become stuck in a cycle of denial and conflict, forced to defend ideas rather than explore them. This rigidity does not protect you, it limits you. Yet, there is a path beyond this trap. True wisdom lies in separating identity from belief. Your core self is not defined by any single idea, but by your capacity to learn, question, and grow. When you allow beliefs to be provisional, tools for understanding rather than unchangeable truths, you open the door to transformation. This requires courage, the courage to face uncertainty, to embrace doubt, and to accept that changing your mind is a sign of strength, not weakness. Imagine the freedom of holding your beliefs lightly, ready to adapt them as the world unfolds in new ways. Imagine communities where dialogue replaces dogma, where curiosity thrives over certainty. This is the evolution of consciousness. When you detach your identity from fixed beliefs, you gain resilience in the face of change. You no longer collapse when truth shifts. You expand. Your mind becomes a dynamic landscape, not a fortress. You learn to navigate complexity and ambiguity, welcoming diverse perspectives. This does not mean abandoning your values or becoming indecisive. Rather, it means grounding yourself in principles flexible enough to accommodate growth and change. It means trusting in your capacity to discern truth, even when it challenges who you thought you were. In a world that is constantly evolving, the ability to adapt your beliefs is essential for survival and fulfillment. The alternative, equating belief with truth, leads to fragmentation, conflict, and suffering. The more you hold on to beliefs as immutable, the more you risk breaking when faced with new realities. You were not meant to be defined by static ideas. You were meant to be a seeker, a learner, a changer. When you untether your identity from fixed beliefs, you step into a greater freedom, a freedom to grow without fear, to face the unknown with curiosity, and to find truth not in rigid dogma, but in evolving understanding. So the next time you feel threatened by a challenge to your beliefs, pause. Remember that your true self is beyond any single idea. It is in your willingness to question, to learn, and to transform. Belief is not truth. It is a step on the path to truth. And that path is endless, open, and alive. Forgiveness is always good. You've been told countless times that forgiveness is always good. That letting go of grudges, releasing anger, and embracing grace is the path to healing, peace, and freedom. It sounds beautiful and noble, a virtue everyone should aspire to. Yet, beneath this seemingly pure belief lies a dangerous shadow. Forgiveness can be weaponized against you, trapping you in cycles of abuse disguised as mercy and compassion. When you hear forgive and forget, it often feels like a moral commandment, an unavoidable duty to absolve others, no matter the harm inflicted. You're led to believe that holding on to pain or resentment only poisons your soul, while forgiveness cleanses and liberates. But this message ignores a painful reality. Sometimes, forgiveness becomes a tool used by others to avoid accountability, to perpetuate harm, and to silence your rightful anger. In abusive relationships, forgiveness can be twisted into a trap. Your urge to forgive the betrayals, the lies, the cruelty, again and again, under the guise of love, faith, or peace. The abuser leverages this belief to demand grace, while repeating their destructive behavior, knowing you'll stay bound by the moral obligation to forgive. This cycle is subtle and insidious. It's not just physical or verbal harm, it's spiritual and psychological manipulation that wears down your boundaries and sense of self. Consider the story of Arun, who endured years of emotional abuse from a close family member. Each time he confronted the pain, he was reminded to forgive, to let go for the sake of family harmony. But the forgiveness demanded was one-sided. While he forgave, the abuse continued, hidden behind smiles and apologies that never led to change. Arun's forgiveness became a leash, tethering him to a cycle that slowly eroded his dignity and peace. This weaponization of forgiveness is a profound betrayal of its true meaning. Genuine forgiveness is not about erasing your pain or excusing harm. It is a process of reclaiming your own power, releasing resentment for your own sake, not to enable further harm or silence your truth. Psychologically, forcing forgiveness before healing can cause deep harm. It can invalidate your emotions, suppress your voice, and trap you in repeated trauma. It creates a false grace that is not grace at all, but bondage disguised as mercy. Healing requires a radical redefinition of forgiveness. It begins with acknowledging your pain without judgment, setting boundaries, and seeking justice where possible. Forgiveness should come only when you are truly ready, on your own terms, and never at the cost of your safety or self-respect. It also means recognizing that forgiveness is not a linear or mandatory process. Sometimes, the healthiest choice is to withhold forgiveness, to protect yourself, to honor your wounds, and to insist on change or separation from toxicity. Imagine a world where forgiveness is a gift, not a demand, where it liberates rather than enslaves, where grace coexists with boundaries, accountability, and self-care. This is the true power of forgiveness, one that honors your dignity and healing journey. You deserve to be free from harm, and forgiveness should never be used to bind you to pain. Letting go is not a command, it's a choice, and that choice must always respect your truth and safety. In the end, forgiveness is only truly good when it serves your healing, not when it serves someone else's control. To forgive is to reclaim your power, not to lose it, and that is a truth worth holding on to. You must stay loyal. You were taught that loyalty is a sacred bond, a virtue that demands unwavering commitment, no matter the cost. Stay loyal, they say. Never abandon those who depend on you. Loyalty is painted as the highest form of honor, something to be prized above all else. But what if this relentless loyalty you prize is actually a cage disguised as devotion? What if staying loyal to pain, to toxicity, or to a life that diminishes you is itself a form of suffering? And what if leaving, what you call betrayal, is actually an act of sacred courage, a necessary step toward freedom and healing? Loyalty is powerful. It binds families, friendships, teams, and nations. It creates trust and connection. But it can also bind you to patterns and people that no longer serve you. It can trap you in cycles of sacrifice where your own well-being is ignored or sacrificed on the altar of obligation. The belief that leaving equals betrayal makes you stay longer than you should, longer than your heart can bear. Imagine a river that flows toward a waterfall. The river's loyalty to its path compels it forward, but sometimes the best thing the river can do is change course, to break free from the path that leads to destruction. Staying loyal to the river's old path only means inevitable ruin. So too with your life. Loyalty to a destructive situation or person is loyalty to pain, not love. Many stay in unhealthy relationships, dead-end jobs, or toxic environments because they equate leaving with betrayal, betraying family, friends, values, or promises. But what they fail to see is that staying loyal to what harms you doesn't protect anything. It erodes your spirit and steals your joy. It teaches you to silence your pain, deny your needs, and accept suffering as duty. Leaving is not betrayal. It is an act of self-preservation and respect. It is a boundary that honors your dignity and recognizes that not all loyalty is deserved. Some loyalties are chains, and some exits are sacred passages into growth, healing, and self-love. Walking away from what hurts you isn't turning your back on loyalty. It's redefining it on your own terms. History and stories are full of those who left when staying would have meant destruction. People who chose themselves in moments when others expected endless sacrifice. Their courage reminds us that loyalty is not blind endurance. It's a conscious choice. Sometimes, the most loyal act you can do is to yourself. So when you feel the pull to stay, ask yourself, am I loyal to love or loyal to pain? Am I honoring connection or sacrificing myself? Remember, true loyalty does not demand your disappearance. It demands honesty, respect, and boundaries. Some exits are not betrayals. They are rites of passage. They are sacred thresholds where you reclaim your life and rewrite your story. To leave is to say, I deserve better. I am worthy of peace. This is not weakness or desertion. It is strength and grace. Embrace the courage to honor yourself. Let go of loyalty to pain and open to loyalty to your own healing. Because the most profound loyalty you can ever have is to your own truth. Perfection is reachable. You're pushed to chase flawlessness, to sculpt every detail of your life, work, and self until it gleams with the impossible shine of perfection. From a young age, the message is clear. Only perfect is acceptable. Grades must be flawless, appearances immaculate, performances without error. This relentless pursuit of perfection becomes a consuming quest, a race with no finish line. But here lies the cruel paradox. Perfection is not freedom. It is a cage. A cage that punishes you endlessly for being real, for being human, for carrying the natural marks of imperfection that make you unique. The pressure to be perfect infiltrates every corner of life: school, work, relationships, social media. It whispers that anything less than ideal is failure. Mistakes are shameful. Vulnerability is weakness. Every flaw is magnified under the harsh spotlight of judgment, internal and external. You tighten the screws of control, micromanaging every moment to avoid the risk of imperfection, but the harder you try, the heavier the weight grows. Consider Emma, a young professional who spent years crafting an image of perfect competence and flawless success. She poured herself into work, edited every word she wrote obsessively, controlled every interaction. But beneath the polished exterior was a storm of anxiety and self-doubt. The fear of being found out as imperfect was paralyzing. When minor errors inevitably appeared, she punished herself mercilessly, feeling as though she had failed not only her work, but her very worth. Or think of Raj, who struggled with body image and self-acceptance. Society's ideals pushed him to sculpt a flawless physique, but the pursuit consumed him. Every small imperfection became a wound to his self-esteem. Perfection was a cage that trapped him in cycles of harsh judgment, dieting, and shame, leaving little room for the natural beauty of his humanity. The myth of perfection is toxic because it denies the essential truth of life. Imperfection is inevitable and beautiful. To be real is to be flawed. Mistakes teach, scars tell stories, vulnerabilities create connection. The cage of perfection punishes you for these very realities, forcing you to hide, suppress, or erase the parts of yourself that make you whole. In chasing perfection, you sacrifice freedom, the freedom to grow, to learn, to make mistakes without fear. You become your own harshest jailer, setting impossible standards that guarantee disappointment. No matter how much you achieve or polish, the bar moves higher, the cage tighter. Breaking free means embracing imperfection. Not as failure, but as authenticity. It means redefining success to include mistakes, setbacks, and the messy, beautiful process of being human. It means allowing yourself to be seen fully, without armor, and finding strength in vulnerability. Perfection is not a goal. It is an illusion crafted by fear and control. True liberation comes from accepting your real self, the flawed, evolving, imperfect you, and finding peace there. So, if you feel trapped by the endless chase, know that the cage is built by impossible expectations, not by your true nature. You are not your flaws, but neither are you less for having them. In letting go of perfection, you reclaim your freedom. You allow yourself to live, to breathe, to be joyfully imperfect. Because real is beautiful, real is brave, real is freedom. Logic beats emotion. Always. You've been taught to trust logic over emotion, to value reason as the ultimate guide, and to suppress feelings that might cloud judgment. It's a worldview praised in classrooms, boardrooms, and society at large, a belief that clear thinking always leads to better decisions. But what if this rigid hierarchy between logic and emotion is a trap? What if privileging reason above all else creates an imbalance that quietly steers you towards self-destruction? Logic is powerful. It helps us analyze, plan, and navigate complexity. Emotion, on the other hand, is often seen as volatile, irrational, even dangerous. From an early age, many learn to control feelings, to present a composed exterior, to think with your head, not your heart. The message is clear. Emotions are weaknesses to be tamed, but humans are not computers. We are creatures whose very survival depends on the interplay of feeling and thought. Emotions are not just noise. They are vital data. They signal needs, values, and truths that pure logic cannot access. When you ignore or suppress these signals, your reasoning becomes detached from your reality. Consider the soldier who suppresses fear to perform under fire. The immediate discipline is necessary, but if fear is completely denied and buried, it resurfaces as PTSD, anxiety, or numbness. Or the executive who makes ruthless decisions in the name of efficiency, neglecting the emotional toll on employees and relationships, ultimately fostering a toxic environment that collapses from within. The imbalance creates a strategist of self-destruction because you become an architect of decisions divorced from the fullness of your humanity. You may excel at cold calculation, but fail to recognize when a path harms your spirit, drains your joy, or fractures your connections. Real-life stories abound. The mathematician who solves complex problems but battles loneliness. The artist who analyzes every brushstroke yet feels disconnected from passion. The parent who prioritizes rational discipline over emotional bonding, leaving children confused or distant. Science confirms this balance is crucial. Neuroscience reveals that emotion and reason are deeply intertwined in the brain. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic, works best when informed by the limbic system, the seat of emotion. Emotions provide context, coloring choices with meaning and urgency. Without them, logic can become cold, rigid, and ultimately self-defeating. Ignoring this truth risks what psychologists call alexithymia, a condition where people struggle to identify or express feelings. It leads to poor decision-making, unhealthy coping, and fractured relationships. It's not weakness to feel, it's weakness to deny feeling. The solution isn't abandoning logic, but integrating it with emotion. Cultivating emotional intelligence alongside critical thinking. Listening to your heart as much as your mind. Learning when to act decisively, and when to pause and reflect on how you truly feel. Imagine a ship navigating stormy seas. Logic is the compass. Emotion is the weather report. Without either, you risk crashing on hidden rocks or drifting aimlessly. To embrace this balance is to honor your full self. To make choices grounded not only in reason, but in authentic feeling. To build strategies that support your well-being, not undermine it. So, next time you find yourself silencing emotions in favor of logic alone, pause. Ask what your feelings are trying to tell you. Reflect on how reason and emotion together can guide you toward choices that sustain, not destroy. Because logic, when wielded without heart, can lead not to triumph, but to ruin. And the greatest wisdom lies in knowing when to listen to both. Gratitude solves suffering. You're told to be grateful, to count your blessings, to find the silver lining, to embrace gratitude even in the midst of pain. Be thankful, they say, and your suffering will ease. It sounds wise, even healing. Gratitude is often painted as the key to peace, a powerful tool that can transform hardship into growth. But beneath this comforting message lies a profound danger. The belief that gratitude solves suffering can silence your righteous anger and keep you polite when justice demands fury. Gratitude is a practice, yes. It can open your heart, shift your perspective, and cultivate resilience. But when gratitude becomes a command, a rigid expectation to be thankful no matter what, it becomes a leash. It shackles your emotional truth. It tells you to swallow your pain, ignore your wounds, and smile through injustice. It makes discomfort a moral failing rather than a signal demanding attention. Consider what happens when you face suffering, be it personal loss, systemic oppression, or everyday cruelty, and are told you must be grateful. Your pain becomes a secret burden, masked by forced politeness. Your anger, that powerful response to injustice and harm, is muted. But anger is not the enemy. It is a necessary fire that fuels change. It is the voice of boundaries crossed and rights denied. Without anger, injustice festers. This belief distorts the natural emotional spectrum. It elevates gratitude above all else, creating a hierarchy where being thankful is more valued than being truthful. You learn to prioritize being polite, to avoid rocking the boat, to hide the storm inside. You become complicit in your own silencing, convinced that expressing anger or dissatisfaction is selfish, ungrateful, or wrong. History and social movements teach us the power of righteous anger. Without it, civil rights would have stalled, injustices would have persisted unchallenged, and progress would have been impossible. The voices that demand change often rise not in gratitude, but in fury. Anger can be a force of healing when directed at systems of harm. It breaks silence, disrupts complacency, and demands accountability. Yet, the message that gratitude solves suffering co-opts this energy. It redirects your focus inward, telling you to find peace within, even as external harm continues. It subtly suggests that suffering is your personal burden to bear quietly, not a call for transformation. This can isolate you, making your pain invisible and your anger unacceptable. Furthermore, forced gratitude can lead to toxic positivity, a culture where negative emotions are denied or dismissed. This denial prevents authentic processing of grief, trauma, and injustice. It teaches you to wear a mask of happiness while your true feelings are locked away, creating emotional dissonance and exhaustion. True gratitude does not require silence in the face of harm. It does not demand that you ignore injustice or suppress your voice. Real gratitude can coexist with anger, sadness, and protest. It can be a foundation from which you stand stronger to fight for what is right. It is not a weapon to pacify, but a light to guide. Your suffering deserves to be seen and heard, not glossed over with forced thanks. Your anger is not a failure. It is a sign that boundaries have been crossed and justice is overdue. To honor your emotional truth is to honor yourself. It is to say, I am worthy of justice, respect, and change. So, when you are told that gratitude will fix your suffering, question that message. Recognize that gratitude is a tool, not a mandate. Allow yourself to feel your full range of emotions, anger, grief, frustration, because they are part of your healing and your power. Let your gratitude be genuine, born from truth, not imposed from silence. You were never meant to be polite in the face of injustice. You were meant to be whole, feeling every emotion, honoring every pain, and standing fierce with your truth. Because only by acknowledging the fire within can you ignite the change without. Starting over is weak. You grow up hearing that starting over is weak, that quitting means failure, defeat, and giving up on your dreams. Society often celebrates perseverance as the ultimate virtue, equating endurance with strength and labeling any pause or change as weakness. But this belief is a profound misunderstanding. In reality, some restarts are not failures. They are revolutions in disguise, radical acts of courage, renewal, and self-respect. The idea that quitting equals failure traps you in a narrow narrative where you must push forward no matter what, even when the path no longer serves you, drains you, or endangers your well-being. It dismisses the complex realities of life. When circumstances shift, when goals evolve, or when the cost of continuing outweighs the benefits. Holding on to a failing course out of fear of being seen as weak can lead to exhaustion, despair, and stagnation. Consider the story of Annika, who spent years in a career that consumed her spirit. She was taught that quitting was a mark of failure, so she persevered through burnout and unhappiness, hiding her pain behind forced smiles and justifications. But when she finally allowed herself to start over, changing careers and redefining success on her own terms, it wasn't weakness. It was a bold revolution. She reclaimed her life and forged a path aligned with her true self. Starting over requires immense strength. It means confronting fear, uncertainty, and the social stigma that clings to failure. It demands self-awareness to recognize when a chapter has ended and vision to embrace the unknown with hope and resilience. Each restart is an act of rebellion against the rigid expectations that say you must never retreat or rethink. Psychologically, this shift redefines strength not as relentless endurance, but as adaptive flexibility. It honors self-compassion over self-punishment and embraces growth as a non-linear process full of detours and new beginnings. Starting over can heal wounds inflicted by unrealistic pressures and open doors to possibilities that were previously hidden. On a deeper level, restarts symbolize transformation. They are the crucibles where identity is reshaped and priorities are realigned. They invite you to shed old skins, release limiting beliefs, and create space for authentic living. In this light, quitting is not a failure, but a powerful choice that honors your evolving journey. This reframing is essential because clinging to the myth that starting over is weakness keeps many trapped in unfulfilling situations. Relationships, jobs, lifestyles that erode joy and vitality. It fosters a culture of shame around change, where people hide their restarts instead of celebrating them as milestones of courage. Imagine a world where starting over is recognized as a brave, revolutionary act, a declaration of self-respect and hope, where quitting the wrong path is celebrated as a vital step toward the right one, where people are encouraged to embrace restarts without shame, knowing that every new beginning holds the promise of growth and renewal. You are not weak for starting over. You are strong beyond measure. Each restart is a revolution, a testament to your resilience, your willingness to choose yourself, and your belief in the possibility of change. In the end, strength lies not in stubborn persistence alone, but in the wisdom to know when to pivot, rest, and begin anew. Starting over is not failure. It is the courageous embrace of life's endless capacity for transformation, and that is a power worth honoring. Life has one purpose. You are often told that life has one purpose, a singular mission you must discover, define, and pursue with unwavering focus. From early childhood, the question echoes, what do you want to be when you grow up? It feels like a test, a destiny you must fulfill, a path you must identify and walk without deviation. Society, culture, and even many self-help voices reinforce this idea that your worth hinges on finding that one true purpose. But what if this belief, this pressure, actually flattens the immense richness of your story into a single narrow line? What if life is not about one purpose, but an ever-evolving tapestry of purposes, experiences, and meanings? This relentless search for a singular purpose creates an intense internal pressure. You imagine yourself as a character in a play with one script, one role. The fear of getting it wrong can freeze you in place. The narrative tells you that if you don't find your one true calling soon, you will be lost, wasted, or insignificant. But life, in its raw and beautiful complexity, resists this simplification. Think about a river flowing through a landscape. It doesn't carve just one straight line. It twists, turns, and adapts to the terrain, nourishing different lands along its journey. Your life is like that river, multifaceted, fluid, and capable of many courses. Defining your entire existence by a single purpose is like trying to contain that river within a rigid channel, draining its vitality and diversity. Many people fall into the trap of trying to pinpoint one career, one passion, or one calling, only to feel boxed in when reality shifts. You might start studying law, only to discover a love for art. You may build a business, then realize your true joy is teaching. You could become a parent and find purpose in raising a family, then later reinvent yourself in entirely different ways. Life's purpose is not static. It is dynamic, layered, and deeply personal. Look at the stories of individuals who defied the myth of one purpose. Consider Maya Angelou, who was poet, singer, dancer, activist, and educator. Or Leonardo da Vinci, whose curiosity spanned art, science, anatomy, and invention. Their lives were not flattened into a single purpose, but expanded into rich, complex journeys. These examples remind us that fulfillment can come from embracing multiplicity, not reduction. The pressure to find one purpose also creates an illusion of linearity in life, which can foster frustration when things don't unfold as planned. You may feel like a failure when your first dream doesn't pan out, or when you change directions. But growth, transformation, and learning often happen through detours, setbacks, and reinvention. Purpose is not a destination, it is a dance. Psychologically, this belief can cause paralysis. The search for the one purpose creates a mental bottleneck where fear of choosing wrong causes inaction. Meanwhile, life keeps moving, experiences keep accumulating, and your story keeps unfolding in unexpected ways. The richness of your identity lies in your capacity to explore, adapt, and evolve. Moreover, this one-purpose belief undervalues the small, everyday meanings that give life texture and depth. Purpose doesn't have to be grandiose or world-changing to be real. It can be the kindness you show, the relationships you nurture, the creative moments you savor, or the small joys you cultivate. These layers of purpose interweave to form a vibrant mosaic far richer than a single narrow line. If you feel trapped by this pressure, remember, your worth is not tied to a single mission. Your story is not a straight path, but a constellation of moments, passions, and contributions. Let yourself explore without judgment. Allow your purpose to unfold in seasons, not in a single declaration. Honor the complexity of your desires, the shifts in your heart, and the fullness of your being. In embracing this, you free yourself from the suffocating expectation of one grand mission. You open to the possibility that life's meaning is plural, diverse, and deeply personal. Your purpose can be many things, changing and growing with you. It can be messy, imperfect, and beautiful all at once. Ultimately, life's true purpose may be the very act of living fully, engaging with the world with curiosity, courage, and openness. Not a single line, but a living, breathing story that you write every day. So, release the pressure to define your life by one narrow purpose. Celebrate the rich, unfolding tapestry of your existence. Because the deepest meaning is found not in a single answer, but in the courageous journey of becoming. Charisma equals integrity, that you are your productivity. This simple phrase carries a weight that crushes many without them even realizing it. From the moment society teaches you to measure your worth by your output, you begin to believe that what you produce is all you are. You wake up every day to a world that applauds the busy, the overworked, the sleepless. You are told that rest is a luxury you cannot afford, that if you pause, you are wasting time, that if you collapse, it is proof of your dedication. But this is not dedication. This is erasure, an erasure of your essence, your humanity, your right to simply be. You are told your value lies in how much you do, how fast you do it, how much you achieve. When you excel, you are praised, but only in relation to your output. When you slow down, doubt creeps in, whispering you are lazy, weak, or worse, worthless. This equation, I produce, therefore I am, is a toxic identity trap. It makes you a machine in a world that demands more and more from you, never satisfied, never pausing. Consider the startup founder who works 14-hour days, surviving on caffeine and willpower, hailed as a hero for their hustle. Their body screams for rest, but the applause drowns the warning signs. Burnout is celebrated as a badge of honor. When they finally collapse, it's called dedication. But what dedication requires sacrifice of self? What pride is there in burning out like a candle at both ends? The deeper truth is that this relentless drive often leads to self-destruction, masked as commitment. Or the artist who must constantly create, produce, share, and perform, or risk fading into obscurity. Their worth becomes a flickering candle, dependent on likes, shares, and praise. When they rest, they fear disappearance. They believe that if they are not visible, they are not valuable. The creative soul becomes trapped in a ceaseless cycle of output, unable to breathe, to live beyond the work. You, the office worker, whose identity dissolves when the project ends, whose self-esteem is tied to spreadsheets and email responses. When there is no task to complete, who are you? The belief that you must constantly be productive steals the simple joy of presence. It replaces the richness of being with the shallow sheen of doing. Why is this so deeply ingrained? It begins early. From childhood, achievement is rewarded, failure punished. Good job means you did something, not you are enough. Schools emphasize grades and tests over curiosity and growth. Workplaces measure employees as units of labor, not as complex humans with needs and rhythms. Social media amplifies this by turning life into a highlight reel, where worth is counted in achievements and outputs. Your identity becomes public, visible, quantifiable. The consequences are profound. When your value depends on output, rest feels like shame. You push through exhaustion, ignore your body's pleas, sacrifice mental health, relationships, and self-care. Sleep is optional, meals are fuel, and connection is secondary. Yet this forced dedication erodes the very essence that productivity demands: creativity, energy, clarity. The harder you push, the more fragile you become. Remember Maya, the entrepreneur who worked herself to collapse, praised for her relentless grind but left hollow and broken inside. Or Daniel, the writer whose worth rose and fell with the word count, trapped in an exhausting cycle of self-judgment. Their stories are not exceptions. They are warnings. This is a systemic issue, not a personal failure. Societies value output over presence, action over being. Time is money, reduces human life to ledger entries. Rest is a radical act of rebellion against this dehumanizing calculus. But the cost is not just physical or mental, it is existential. When you define yourself by productivity alone, you lose sight of your inherent worth. You forget that your value is not something to be earned or proven. It exists even when you do nothing, even when you rest. Breaking free begins with awareness. It means rejecting the lie that you are only as good as what you produce. It means reclaiming rest as a sacred right, not a luxury. It means redefining success and worth on your own terms, honoring the rhythms of your body and soul. Imagine a world where pausing is celebrated, where stepping back is strength, where worth is unconditional. Not because of a spreadsheet, a project, or a number of tasks done, but because you exist, whole, imperfect, human. Rest is not weakness. Rest is renewal. It is the soil where creativity blooms, where resilience grows, where joy flourishes. When you allow yourself to rest, you make space for reflection, healing, and growth. You reclaim your identity beyond what you produce. The world may call exhaustion dedication, but true dedication begins with honoring yourself. You are not your productivity. You are the person who produces, and that person deserves rest, compassion, and recognition just as much as any achievement. This truth is radical and revolutionary. It is the foundation of a sustainable, fulfilling life. So the next time you feel worthless for resting, remember, your value is not defined by output. It is defined by your existence, and in that existence lies infinite worth. Anger is always wrong. You've been told that anger is always wrong, that to show rage is to lose control, to be destructive, to harm yourself and others. From childhood, you learn to swallow your fury, to keep it locked away, to respond with calm or silence. But what if this teaching masks a deeper truth? What if anger is not a flaw, but a sacred force, a catalyst for justice? And what if suppressing anger doesn't protect you, but feeds shame, fear, and silence? Anger is one of the most powerful emotions we possess. It is primal, raw, and often misunderstood. Yet throughout history, anger has fueled revolutions, sparked social movements, and demanded recognition for those long ignored. It has been the voice of the oppressed, the fire of change, and the shield of the vulnerable. Consider the civil rights movement in the United States. For decades, African Americans faced systemic injustice, violence, segregation, discrimination. The anger born from this suffering was not a petty grievance, but a sacred refusal to accept dehumanization. Figures like Martin Luther King Jr. channeled righteous anger into peaceful protest, showing that anger need not lead to chaos, but to profound transformation. Without that anger, the struggle for equality might have remained silent, invisible. Yet society often paints anger in a negative light, especially when expressed by marginalized groups. Women who voice frustration are labeled hysterical. Workers who protest unfair treatment are called troublemakers. Youth who challenge authority are branded rebellious in a way that discounts their valid concerns. The message is clear. Anger is dangerous, unwanted, and wrong. But what happens when you suppress your anger? Inside, it festers. It becomes shame, the deep corrosive feeling that you are bad for feeling bad. It breeds self-doubt and silence. It hides beneath smiles and polite words, but it never disappears. Psychologists explain that chronic anger suppression can lead to stress, anxiety, depression, and even physical illness. The body remembers what the mind refuses to express. On a personal level, denying anger can fracture relationships. When you swallow rage, resentment builds. Small wounds turn into deep chasms. Communication breaks down. The person you are inside becomes distant from the person you show outside. Yet, anger also holds wisdom. It signals boundaries crossed, values violated, and injustice faced. It is a call to attention, a warning that something must change. To ignore it is to blind yourself to vital truths about your experience. Learning to honor anger means recognizing it as a sacred messenger. It means expressing it constructively, not destructively. It means using anger to fuel clarity and action, rather than blame and violence. Take the example of whistleblowers who expose corruption at great personal risk. Their anger at injustice compels them to speak truth to power, or survivors of abuse who, through anger, reclaim their strength and demand accountability. These expressions of anger heal wounds and inspire change. In contrast, those who have never learned to accept their anger may turn it inward, harming themselves, or explode unexpectedly, harming others. The balance lies in awareness, knowing when to feel, when to express, and how to transform anger into justice. Spiritual traditions also acknowledge the sacredness of anger. Some indigenous cultures treat anger as a fire to be respected, a force that purifies and protects. Ancient philosophies teach that anger, when guided by wisdom, is not sin, but a natural response to wrongdoing. Imagine anger as a river. If dammed, it floods and destroys. If channeled wisely, it powers growth and life. The key is not to eradicate anger, but to embrace it consciously, to give it voice without letting it consume you, to allow it to wake your sense of justice without drowning compassion. So, next time you feel rage rising, don't hide it or shame yourself. Listen. Ask what injustice it reveals. Find safe ways to express and act. Seek healing rather than suppression, because anger is not the enemy. It is the sacred fire within you, urging you to claim your worth, defend your truth, and awaken justice in the world. And when you deny that fire, you feed only shame and silence. But when you honor it, you ignite transformation. That is the power and the promise of anger. Growth must be linear. You were taught that growth is a straight line, that progress must be constant, steady, and upward, that every day should bring improvement, every step closer to a better self. This belief is deeply ingrained in our culture. Success stories, self-help mantras, productivity ideals all preach the same truth. Growth is linear. But healing, transformation, and true growth rarely follow a straight path. Instead, they spiral, loop, and sometimes even feel like falling backward. Yet, when you expect progress to be linear, every setback feels like failure, every stumble a personal defeat. This illusion of linear growth creates immense pressure. You measure yourself against an idealized timeline of progress, comparing your messy reality to others' polished narratives. When you don't feel better today than yesterday, you question your worth, your effort, your potential. You blame yourself for not advancing fast enough, for not being good enough. But this internal narrative ignores the natural complexity of healing. Healing is not a race or a ladder with clearly defined rungs. It is a spiral, sometimes moving forward, sometimes circling back to old wounds, sometimes pausing in stillness. Like waves on the shore, your progress ebbs and flows. This is not regression. It is the essential process of integration. Revisiting old pain, confronting deep fears, and unraveling long-standing patterns often requires moving through discomfort again and again before new growth can take hold. Expecting growth to be linear blinds you to the richness of this process. It traps you in a cycle of judgment and self-criticism, where setbacks feel like failures instead of opportunities. You might push yourself harder, only to burn out, or give up altogether because you believe you've lost ground. This belief undermines resilience, making the natural twists and turns of healing into sources of shame and frustration. Consider how this shows up in mental health. Recovery from trauma, addiction, or illness rarely progresses in a straight line. There are days of hope and strength, and days clouded by pain and relapse. Each spiral, each detour, is part of the journey. Accepting this allows for patience and compassion with yourself, knowing that healing is not about perfection, but persistence. The same is true for personal growth in skills, relationships, or self-awareness. You might master something for a moment, then falter unexpectedly. You might feel confident one day, vulnerable the next. This fluctuation is natural and necessary. It signals that you are engaging deeply with your experience, not merely marching forward blindly. Breaking free from the myth of linear growth requires embracing uncertainty and imperfection. It means redefining success as showing up, not as a fixed destination. It means learning to be kind to yourself in setbacks, understanding that spirals bring you closer to your authentic self, even when the path feels confusing. Imagine the relief of releasing yourself from the tyranny of constant progress. Imagine allowing your growth to unfold in its own rhythm, with its own cycles. You no longer judge the backward steps, but see them as moments of reflection and recalibration. You no longer measure your worth by how fast you heal, but by your willingness to keep moving in whatever way you can. This shift is a radical act of self-love. It frees you from the chains of unrealistic expectations and opens you to the messy, beautiful truth of transformation. Growth is not a straight line. It is a dance of falling and rising, spiraling ever onward. So, when you stumble or feel stuck, remember this. You are not failing. You are healing. You are growing. And sometimes, growth looks like returning to the beginning to gather strength for the next leap. The spiral is your path, complex, non-linear, and deeply human. You were never meant to be perfect or constantly moving forward without pause. You were meant to grow with grace, in spirals that honor your whole self, light and shadow, progress and setback, strength and vulnerability. Your past defines you. You grow up carrying the weight of your past as if it is the only truth that defines you. Every mistake, every failure, every painful memory becomes a chain that binds your present and future. You are told, explicitly or implicitly, that who you were, your history, your origins, your scars, must determine who you are. This belief that your past defines you feels natural and inevitable, but it is a profound deception that turns memory into a prison and shame into a permanent identity. When your past is allowed to dominate your sense of self, you become trapped in an unending loop of regret and self-judgment. The moments you wish to forget become the lenses through which you view every action, every relationship, every decision. Your history is not just a part of your story. It becomes the whole story. You begin to believe that change is impossible, that growth is futile, and that you are destined to repeat your mistakes endlessly. This mindset is deeply limiting and toxic. It robs you of the freedom to redefine yourself, to break patterns, and to heal. Instead of being a foundation to learn from, your past morphs into a cage that restricts your potential. Shame, born from those past experiences, is not just an emotion, but becomes your identity, a false self that convinces you that you are unworthy, broken, or doomed. Take the example of someone named Priya. She grew up in a family that constantly reminded her of her failures, mistakes, and missteps. Every setback was a scar etched into her self-image. As an adult, Priya found herself avoiding new opportunities, fearing judgment and failure because she believed her past had sealed her fate. Her history became a prison cell, locking her away from the life she longed for. This belief can also distort memory itself. You start to selectively recall moments that confirm your unworthiness, ignoring the times you succeeded, grew, or showed resilience. The mind becomes a biased storyteller, replaying shameful narratives that reinforce your prison walls. The past is no longer a neutral record, but a weapon turned inward. Psychologically, this creates a cycle of self-fulfilling prophecy. When you believe your past defines you, you act in ways that confirm that belief. You resist change, avoid risks, and isolate yourself, all to protect the identity you have come to believe is fixed and immutable. But the truth is far more liberating. Your past is not a sentence, it is a chapter, not your entire book. Memories are fragments, not prisons. Shame is an emotion, not your essence. You are not the sum of your past mistakes, but the potential of your present choices and future possibilities. Healing begins when you challenge the narrative that your past defines you. It starts with reclaiming your story, acknowledging your history without allowing it to dictate your worth or your destiny. It involves cultivating compassion for yourself, recognizing that everyone carries wounds and that your value is not contingent on perfection or past success. Imagine a life where your past is a source of wisdom, not shame, where memory serves growth instead of imprisonment, where your identity is shaped by your courage to evolve rather than your fears of repetition. This is not denial or forgetting, but a conscious choice to embrace the fullness of your being beyond history's shadows. You deserve to live free from the chains of past pain. Your past may inform you, but it does not define you. You are a dynamic, evolving being with the power to create new narratives, break old cycles, and step into the life you choose, not the one imposed by memory or shame. In the end, the belief that your past defines you is a false cage. The real freedom lies in understanding that you are not your history. You are the author of your future, and that truth can set you free. Time heals all wounds. You've heard it said over and over again. Time heals all wounds. It's a comforting phrase, a soothing mantra whispered when life's pain feels unbearable. You wait, believing that with enough passing days, months, or years, the sharp edges of trauma will dull, the heaviness in your heart will lift, and peace will quietly settle in. But what if this widely accepted belief is actually a dangerous illusion? What if waiting for time alone to heal you only delays the crucial actions you need to take? What if trauma, left unspoken and unattended, festers in the silence, rotting slowly while the clock ticks on, unnoticed and unchecked? Time, in its relentless flow, is neutral. It neither heals nor harms on its own. Healing is an active process. It requires courage, acknowledgement, and deliberate effort. When you tell yourself to simply wait, to give time space to work its magic, you may inadvertently silence your pain and deny yourself the care you desperately need. Trauma does not vanish because days pass. It lingers, hidden beneath the surface, shaping your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors in subtle and often destructive ways. Imagine a wound left untreated. On the surface, it might appear to be closing, but beneath the skin, infection spreads. Without cleansing, attention, and care, what was once a simple cut can become gangrenous. Your emotional wounds are no different. Waiting for time to heal them without confronting the pain or seeking help is like leaving that injury to fester in the dark. The longer you wait, the deeper the damage can become, complicating recovery and entangling your psyche in layers of unaddressed hurt. This is why many carry invisible burdens for years, not because time failed them, but because they trusted that time alone would fix what needed active tending. The silence around trauma can feel like a heavy prison. It isolates you, creates shame, and convinces you that your pain is your secret burden to bear alone. The ticking clock becomes a reminder of how long the pain has been hidden, not a sign of healing. Healing demands action, speaking your truth, seeking support, engaging in therapy, practicing self-compassion, and confronting painful memories. It is a journey through discomfort, not a passive waiting game. The belief that time heals all wounds can lull you into inaction, prolonging suffering and preventing the breakthroughs that come from facing pain head-on. Consider the stories of those who found healing, not by waiting, but by choosing to act. Survivors of trauma who bravely spoke out, sought help, and reclaimed their lives. Their healing was a process of conscious engagement, not a passive passage of days. Their courage transformed wounds into wisdom, silence into voice, despair into hope. Waiting without action is not healing. It is avoidance. It keeps trauma locked inside, allowing it to shape your future in unseen ways, affecting relationships, self-esteem, and emotional resilience. To truly heal, you must pair time with intention, patience with purpose. So, when you feel tempted to just wait for the pain to fade, remember, time is a vessel, not a cure. Healing grows from the seeds of acknowledgement, expression, and care. Your wounds deserve your attention, your voice, and your action. Don't let the silent ticking of the clock be the soundtrack of unspoken pain. Choose to move toward healing actively because your peace depends on it. Being liked is vital. You shapeshift to avoid rejection. From the moment you become aware of others' opinions, you begin to mold yourself to fit their expectations. It starts small, changing a word, altering a gesture. But over time, this becomes your survival strategy. You learn to wear masks tailored to each situation, hoping to be liked, accepted, and safe. The belief that being liked is vital feels natural, even necessary. After all, social acceptance is deeply wired into human survival. But this belief carries a hidden cost. It kills your authenticity and makes you invisible to yourself. Why do we crave approval so intensely? Humans are social creatures. Belonging to a group was once a matter of life and death. Our ancestors depended on their tribe for protection, food, and connection. This primal need is still alive in your brain, nudging you to conform, to please, to avoid rejection at all costs. But what happens when pleasing others means betraying who you truly are? Consider the story of Lily, who learned early that her true opinions were unpopular in her family. She began to mute her voice, agreeing with others even when she disagreed. Over years, the mask became second nature. She became everyone's favorite. But inside, she felt hollow, disconnected from herself. The more she shaped herself to be liked, the more she lost touch with her own desires and values. Or take James, who adapted his personality to fit different friend groups, work environments, and romantic partners. Each version was polished, likable, and agreeable. But when alone, he faced a deep loneliness, the realization that no one was truly seeing him. He was invisible to others and to himself. This shape-shifting creates a paradox. To be liked, you hide your true self. But to be truly known and loved, authenticity is essential. When you deny your reality, you deny your worth. The masks become prisons, and the effort to maintain them is exhausting. The belief that being liked is vital also silences your voice. It teaches you to avoid conflict, suppress boundaries, and prioritize others' comfort over your own. You lose the courage to stand firm, to say no, or to express unpopular truths. This stifles growth, creativity, and genuine connection. The tragic consequence is that you become invisible. Not because others don't see you, but because you don't see yourself. Your reflection becomes a collage of others' expectations, a fading shadow of your true essence. Breaking free begins with courage, the courage to be vulnerable, to risk rejection for the sake of authenticity. It means embracing imperfection and uncertainty. It means trusting that the right people will like you for who you truly are, not who you pretend to be. Imagine a life where you don't have to shapeshift to survive, where your voice matters because it is honest, where connection is deep because it is real, where you are seen, heard, and loved, not for a mask, but for your true self. This freedom is not easy. It requires patience, self-compassion, and resilience, but it is the path to genuine belonging and self-acceptance. Remember, being liked is natural, but it is not more important than being real. When you honor your truth, you reclaim your visibility, not just to others, but to yourself. And in that visibility lies true connection, power, and peace. Hardship means you're cursed. You've been told that hardship means you're cursed, that suffering is a mark of personal failure, a punishment for flaws or mistakes, a sign that somehow you or your family are less deserving than others. This belief settles like a heavy chain around the heart, binding pain with shame and silence. But what if this narrative, this idea that hardship is a curse, is not truth, but a lie? A story that blinds you to your own resilience and strength? And worse, what if it turns survivors into scapegoats, blaming them for wounds inflicted by forces far beyond their control? Throughout history, countless societies have explained misfortune through the lens of curses, divine wrath, or moral failings. When crops failed, when sickness spread, or when disaster struck, the easy answer was often that some hidden fault lay with the victim. The idea that suffering was deserved gave people a false sense of control over chaos. If you knew who was cursed and why, you could protect yourself. But that protection came at a price. The innocent were shamed and isolated, their pain silenced or dismissed. This narrative has immense power because it assigns blame. It takes a complex, often random or systemic event, and reduces it to a personal fault. That person is cursed. That family is cursed. That community is cursed. And so, instead of looking outward, at unjust systems, historical oppression, or environmental catastrophe, attention turns inward. The sufferer is held responsible, their hardship seen as their own failing. Imagine the devastating impact on someone facing loss or poverty. If society whispers that you are cursed, you carry not only your own pain, but the weight of judgment. Shame compounds suffering. You may withdraw, hide your struggles, or accept abuse silently, believing you deserve it. This isolation deepens wounds and blocks healing. It erases stories of courage and endurance, replacing them with stigma and silence. Consider refugees forced from their homes by war or famine. To label their hardship as a curse strips away the brutal realities of displacement and conflict. It denies the political, economic, and environmental causes of their suffering. Instead of offering empathy and support, the curse narrative fuels xenophobia and exclusion. Victims become scapegoats, blamed for their own survival. On a larger scale, entire communities have been branded cursed because of ethnicity, religion, or social status. This has justified systemic oppression, discrimination, segregation, and violence under the guise of moral or spiritual judgment. The myth of curse masks the real mechanisms of power and injustice, but hardship also reveals the remarkable resilience of the human spirit. Each story of survival carries lessons of endurance, courage, and hope. People rebuild shattered lives, nurture broken communities, and find meaning amid devastation. This resilience is the true antidote to the curse narrative. Modern psychology supports this view. Reframing hardship not as curse but as challenge fosters healing and growth. It empowers survivors to reclaim agency, practice self-compassion, and transform pain into purpose. Post-traumatic growth, a recognized phenomenon, shows that adversity can lead to deeper insight, stronger relationships, and renewed appreciation for life. Breaking free from the curse myth demands collective courage. It requires confronting stigma, exposing systemic injustice, and uplifting the voices of those who suffer. It calls for compassion instead of condemnation, understanding instead of judgment. It asks society to share the burdens of hardship rather than isolate the burdened. If you find yourself trapped in the belief that hardship means you're cursed, pause. Know that suffering is not a reflection of your worth. It is part of the human condition, often shaped by forces beyond your control, but met by the strength within you. You are not cursed. You are a survivor. Your resilience is the true legacy of hardship. History, culture, and science all remind us. Pain is inevitable, but shame is a choice. We can choose to carry our wounds in silence or to break the silence and find healing. We can choose to blame victims or to challenge the systems that cause suffering. We can perpetuate myths of curses or embrace truths of resilience. The path forward begins with recognizing the power of narrative, how stories shape identity and reality. When the story of curse is replaced with one of survival and strength, everything changes. It creates space for justice, for healing, and for hope. No curse can extinguish the human spirit. No hardship defines your worth. You are more than the pain you endure. You are the courage to keep going. The light that breaks through darkness, the voice that demands a better world. Remember this always. Hardship does not mean you are cursed. It means you are alive. And within you lies the power to overcome, to transform, and to rise. The world owes you. You grow up believing the world owes you fairness, that life will balance itself out in your favor if only you wait long enough, if only you expect justice to arrive on time. This belief is comforting. It promises that the scales will tip, that your pain will be recognized, your efforts rewarded, your dignity restored. But this waiting for fairness as a birthright can become a cage. It paralyzes your power and makes victimhood seductive. When you believe the world owes you something, you position yourself as a passive recipient. You wait for circumstances, for systems, for others to deliver what you deserve. This waiting can feel righteous. It is, after all, just to want fairness. But it often breeds frustration, resentment, and helplessness. The longer you wait, the more the weight of expectation drags you down. Your energy drains, your hope dims, and you become trapped in the identity of the one who is wronged. Victimhood is seductive because it explains your pain. It provides a narrative where you are the innocent and the world is the offender. It offers sympathy, attention, and a reason for suffering. But it also demands surrender. When you cling to the idea that fairness must come to you, you give away your agency. You allow external forces to dictate your worth and your future. History shows us how waiting for fairness can stall progress. Oppressed groups who waited for justice rather than claiming their power often faced generations of continued suffering. Change rarely comes by passive expectation. It demands action, courage, and sometimes defiance. Waiting for fairness can silence your voice, dull your fight, and chain you to despair. This belief also blurs the line between reality and entitlement. The world is rarely fair. Injustice is baked into systems, embedded in institutions, and reflected in daily interactions. When you expect fairness as a guarantee, every injustice feels like a personal attack, deepening your sense of victimhood. This magnifies suffering, but does not change the conditions causing it. Paradoxically, this mindset can also prevent healing and growth. You may blame your circumstances, others' choices, or fate, rather than seeking ways to reclaim your power. You may feel stuck, waiting for a fairness that never arrives, while your own potential lies dormant. You become a prisoner of expectation, rather than an architect of your life. But the truth is, the world owes you nothing. No guarantee. No automatic justice. This is a harsh reality, but also a liberating one. When you release the illusion of owed fairness, you awaken to your own power. You stop waiting and start acting. You become a creator, not a victim. You choose how to respond, how to heal, how to build. This shift is not about denying injustice or ignoring pain. It is about reclaiming agency in spite of it. It is about finding strength within when the world fails to give it. It is about transforming waiting into doing, despair into hope, passivity into purpose. Imagine the freedom in this truth. No longer dependent on external fairness, you take responsibility for your path. You seek opportunities to change your circumstances. You build resilience in the face of imbalance. You find voice when silence is expected. You become unstoppable, not because the world owed you, but because you claimed your power regardless. Waiting for fairness can feel righteous, but it is also paralyzing. Victimhood offers comfort, but it is a cage, and true power rises when you let go of what the world owes you and instead ask, what can I give myself? How can I grow, resist, and create despite injustice? You were never meant to wait passively for fairness. You were meant to rise, to act, to forge your own justice, because the world owes you nothing, but you owe yourself everything. Healing means forgetting. You've been told that healing means forgetting, that to move on, you must erase the pain, the trauma, the wounds that once cut deep. The common narrative suggests that true recovery is a clean slate, a blank page wiped of scars and memories. But this belief is a dangerous misconception that traps you in denial and repression, burying pain alive instead of setting it free. When you think healing requires forgetting, you push your suffering into dark corners of your mind, hoping it will disappear if you simply don't acknowledge it. You try to erase the memories, silence the emotions, and pretend the wounds never existed. But pain is not a file that can be deleted. It is a part of your life's story, complex, raw, and deeply human. This false notion of forgetting leads to what psychologists call emotional suppression, a state where unresolved trauma festers beneath the surface, often resurfacing in unexpected ways. It can manifest as anxiety, depression, physical ailments, or repeated patterns of self-sabotage. By burying pain alive, you are not freeing yourself, but imprisoning your true self. True healing is not about erasure. It is about integration. It means acknowledging the pain, sitting with it, and allowing it to be part of your whole experience without letting it define or consume you. Integration transforms pain into wisdom, resilience, and growth. It is the process of weaving your wounds into the fabric of your being, creating a richer, more authentic self. Take the example of Ravi, who endured years of emotional trauma, but believed healing meant forgetting his past. He tried to shove his memories aside, refusing to talk about his pain or confront his feelings. Over time, this repression led to severe anxiety attacks and emotional numbness. Only when Ravi began to face his wounds, to integrate his experiences with compassion, did he find a true path to healing, a healing that did not erase but embraced. This process is neither quick nor easy. It requires courage to confront the parts of yourself you wish to hide, and patience to sit with discomfort without judgment. It also demands support, whether from therapy, community, or trusted relationships, to safely explore and process your pain. Healing as integration honors the full spectrum of your humanity: joy and sorrow, strength and vulnerability, light and shadow. It respects your story in all its complexity and affirms that pain, while difficult, holds meaning and potential for transformation. Imagine a life where healing is not a forgetting, but a remembering, a deep, compassionate remembering that frees you from being controlled by past wounds, where pain is no longer buried alive, but carried gently, like a scar that tells a story of survival and growth. You deserve healing that honors your whole self, not just the parts that feel safe or pleasant. To heal is to embrace your truth fully, allowing every part of your journey to contribute to the person you are becoming. In the end, healing means integration, not deletion. Forgetting is an illusion that buries pain alive. True healing is a courageous embrace of your whole story, a path that leads not to emptiness, but to profound wholeness and freedom. Identity must be fixed. You've been told that to live a meaningful life, you must figure yourself out, that your identity is a fixed puzzle to solve. This belief seeps into your mind early, as if discovering a single unchanging you is the ultimate goal. You hear phrases like, find yourself, know who you are, and be true to yourself, which imply that there exists a final, stable version of you waiting to be uncovered. But what if this pressure to fix your identity is not only unrealistic, but also harmful? What if identity is not a rigid destination, but a fluid, ever-changing journey? And what if the belief that you must have a fixed self turns natural growth and transformation into crises of confusion, fear, and despair? Identity is often pictured as a solid foundation, a structure built once and for all, upon which you can confidently stand. This comforting image suggests that once you find that foundation, life becomes easier. But in reality, human identity is more like a river, constantly flowing, shifting, and adapting to new experiences, insights, and challenges. It is alive, not static. To think otherwise is to trap yourself in a narrow box, resisting the natural evolution that life demands. The pressure to figure yourself out can lead to intense inner turmoil. When you experience change, new desires, beliefs, roles, or perspectives, you may panic, believing you've lost yourself. You might ask, who am I really? As if the shifting landscape of your identity means failure or instability. This is the crisis that the myth of fixed identity creates. It pathologizes growth and labels uncertainty as weakness. Consider the phases of your life: childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and beyond. Each phase brings new layers of complexity, new roles, and new questions about who you are. You are not the same person you were at 15 or 25, nor should you be. To expect a fixed self across decades ignores the rich, unfolding story of your life. Identity is a narrative you continuously author, not a final answer to be found. This belief also stifles authenticity. When you feel compelled to present a consistent self at all times, you may suppress parts of yourself that don't fit the fixed version you've constructed. This leads to fragmentation, where your external persona conflicts with your evolving inner reality. You might wear masks to appear certain and stable, while inside, you wrestle with doubt and change. Psychologically, embracing fluid identity can be liberating. It invites curiosity about yourself, openness to transformation, and acceptance of complexity. It allows you to explore different passions, beliefs, and relationships without guilt or fear. It frees you from the paralysis of needing to have all the answers right now. Look at examples of great thinkers, artists, and leaders who reinvented themselves repeatedly. They embraced the fluidity of their identity and allowed change to be a source of creativity and growth, not crisis. Their lives show us that identity is not a problem to solve, but a process to engage with. So, when you feel the urge to figure yourself out as if it's a fixed truth, pause and remember, you are a work in progress. Your identity is a living, breathing journey, shaped by every experience, every challenge, and every choice. The goal is not to lock yourself into a static definition, but to flow with the currents of change while holding on to your core values and integrity. Releasing the myth of fixed identity transforms uncertainty from threat into opportunity. It shifts your focus from finding a perfect, unchanging self to embracing the beautiful complexity of becoming. This is where true authenticity lives. Not in permanence, but in the courage to evolve. Your identity is not a crisis waiting to happen. It is a dance you are invited to join, a dance of continuous discovery, growth, and renewal. So give yourself permission to be fluid, to change, to explore, and to become more than any fixed idea of yourself could ever contain. Contentment means settling, and you are your productivity. This phrase is more than a simple statement. It is a silent demand echoing in the chambers of modern life. It whispers that your worth is measured not by who you are, but by what you do, how much you achieve, how tirelessly you work. The clock ticks relentlessly, and every second is a test of your value, your dedication, your identity. In this relentless race, resting feels like losing. Slowing down seems like failure, and collapsing from exhaustion is celebrated as proof of your commitment. But this equation, your value equaling your productivity, is a dangerous myth that crushes the human spirit beneath its weight. From early childhood, society conditions us to equate worth with output. School rewards, grades, tests, and achievements. The workplace demands results, efficiency, and constant engagement. Social media amplifies this, turning lives into highlight reels of accomplishments and relentless productivity. We are taught to hustle harder, grind longer, and produce more. The loudest voices praise those who sacrifice sleep, health, and even relationships for the sake of relentless progress. Work harder, push through, no pain, no gain. These slogans become our internal mantras, conditioning us to believe that stopping means falling behind, and falling behind means being less. But what happens when you accept this belief? When you internalize that your worth depends on what you produce, your very sense of self becomes fragile and conditional. Rest becomes a luxury you cannot afford. Moments of pause are filled with guilt and anxiety. The body's warning signs, fatigue, burnout, illness, are ignored or masked as weakness. You become a machine programmed for output, relentless and unsparing. You work until collapse, then rise again, repeating the cycle because your identity is bound to productivity. Consider the story of Maya, a startup founder praised for her tireless hustle. She worked 14-hour days, living on caffeine and sheer willpower. To the outside world, she was a symbol of dedication, a beacon of success. But beneath the surface, her body screamed for rest, her mind spiraled with anxiety, and her spirit felt hollow. When she finally collapsed, hospitalized with severe burnout, the response was not empathy, but awe for her relentless dedication. The cult of productivity glorified her exhaustion, ignoring the human cost. Or, think of Daniel, a writer whose self-worth rose and fell with his daily word count. On days when words flowed, he felt powerful and validated. On days when the page remained blank, he battled despair and self-loathing. His identity was trapped in the fluctuating numbers of his output. The pressure to produce creative work relentlessly robbed him of joy and made every rest a source of guilt. This is not merely individual struggle, it is a systemic crisis. Our economic models demand constant growth and productivity. Workplaces incentivize overwork and normalize burnout. Technology blurs boundaries, making you reachable 24/7. Social media fuels comparison and performance anxiety. The idea that you are only as valuable as your output is woven into the fabric of contemporary life, making resistance difficult and costly. Yet the truth remains. You are not your productivity. Your worth is inherent, not conditional. It exists independent of your work, your achievements, or your output. You are a human being with intrinsic value, deserving of rest, compassion, and dignity. Rest is not failure, it is renewal. It is the sacred space where creativity is nurtured, resilience is built, and clarity is found. When you allow yourself to rest, you honor your humanity, not betray your dedication. Imagine a world where rest is celebrated as an essential part of life, not a weakness. A world where productivity is balanced with presence, and worth is measured not by a ledger of tasks, but by the fullness of being. This is not utopia. It is possible and necessary for survival and thriving. Breaking free from the tyranny of productivity begins with awareness, recognizing the toxic beliefs ingrained in you and the culture around you. It requires compassion for yourself and others, and the courage to set boundaries, to say no, to prioritize well-being over output. It means redefining success to include rest, creativity, connection, and health. You deserve to exist beyond what you produce. Your value is not a performance metric, but a fundamental truth. When you remember this, the relentless cycle loosens its grip. You find strength in stillness, wisdom in pause, and freedom in balance. The world may praise exhaustion as dedication, but true dedication begins with honoring yourself. You are not your productivity. You are the person who produces, and that person deserves rest, compassion, and recognition, no less than any achievement. This truth is radical. It is revolutionary. It is the foundation of a sustainable, meaningful life. So when you feel worthless for resting, remember this. Your worth is not defined by your output. It is defined by your existence. And in that existence lies infinite, unshakable value.